Chapter 841. Deep Sea. A phantom was stealthily moving. Depth 300, heading 020. All normal. The slightly dark bridge constantly sounded orderly navigation terms. This was the first voyage of the new son of Dan's slave. At the same time, it was also the first combat mission. As for whether the new son of Dan's slave could complete the first combat mission at the same time as the first voyage, Richard Mardukas, who once again automatically retired to the position of first officer, didn't need to doubt it at all. Because the son of Dan's slave, the goddess of victory, once again sat on the captain's seat of the battleship. It seems that the son of Dan's slave is in a very good state. The brilliance of the main screen covered the beautiful silver hair with a layer of ever-changing colorful gauze. Under the silver hair, the familiar eyes of the son of Dan's slave were looking at the figure on the screen. That's natural. The power of the Hedron shield is very reliable. On the screen, Hinana raised her proud little face, looking very cute. Teresa didn't dislike it, because she knew that Hinana had the confidence and qualifications to be proud. Not only her own extraordinary power that ordinary people couldn't imagine, but also her own background was enough to make any country on Earth tremble in fear. The next mission will be handed over to you. Teresa, I still have some things to deal with here. As if receiving a communication from the Imperial capital, Hinana listened carefully, then took the initiative to cut off the communication. Then, Teresa looked at the first officer who stood behind her as usual. Mardukas, are you ready to see this new world? Richard, Mardukas stood at attention and replied loudly, Yes. Captain, your subordinate is ready. Teresa smiled gently, turned back, and pointed at the main screen. Bow up 3 degrees. After leaving the water, maximum speed. Target Aubrey. The terrifying screams lingered in the sky for a long time. This was already the 4th day after the strange behemoth fell from the sky. As if affected by the fall of the behemoth, the monsters that should have surged like a tide actually showed a trace of stagnation. For several days, they didn't attack the broken defense line set up by Aubrey on the dry seabed. This allowed the stressed Aubrey soldiers to breathe a sigh of relief, but also put a lot of pressure on Aubrey's frontline commanders. Especially when they stared at the corpse left behind by the behemoth that fell with monstrous might, the commanders who guarded Aub's last line of defense couldn't help but ask themselves, if such a monster did not turn into a pile of corpses when it fell, but instead charged at Aub's broken defense line, would Aub have already ceased to exist? These thoughts didn't only exist in the minds of the soldiers and frontline commanders. They also existed in the mind of the commander-in-chief who maintained Aub's defensive line, the current prime minister of Aub, Carly Yura Ashar. Currently, Carrie, who hadn't had the time to rest, had completed a new round of defense deployment. She immediately rushed to the Dawn Society's development department. Here, a project that had been going on for several days was being carried out. His goal was to find some clues as soon as possible from his suspected man-made objects found in the corpses of the monsters that fell from the sky. Perhaps these clues would become the clues that would allow Aubrey to be saved in this catastrophe. Of course, this was just a thought that Carrie couldn't control in the face of a new round of bloody battle. Hearing Carrie's footsteps, the development director of Dawn Society, Erica Simmons, who was working on the console, quickly got up to greet Carrie. Prime Minister, no, there's no need for that. Director Simmons, tell me about the situation. Carrie, who had grown into a swift and decisive leader, raised her hand to stop Erica Simmons and went straight to the point. Yes. Then, please have a look, Prime Minister. This was a development laboratory with strict protective measures. In addition to the daily development work, it was also responsible for cracking the advanced technology that Aub had not mastered and could obtain from some special channels. In the early days, this laboratory was also responsible for the research of cracking the alien insects that fell from the sky. It was only because of a moment of carelessness that this laboratory was modified to its current state. Therefore, under Erica Simmons' control, when 3 high-strength steel plates used for isolation slowly descended, Carrie was able to see the man-made objects that fell from the sky together with the monsters. A prismatic shape. It was a steel plate with geometric patterns. There were grooves on both sides that looked like vents. At the end of the prismatic object, she could barely make out the words. Although there were some differences in the spelling, Carrie was able to make out some of the meaning. Armed wings? No matter what angle she looked at the appearance of the unknown object, Carrie could almost determine that it was an object created by human hands. Prime Minister. This is indeed a man-made object. As expected, the moment Erica Simmons opened her mouth, she concluded that Carrie's guess was true. But her next words made Carrie frown. But it is not a man-made object that I, or even the Dawn Society's database, can identify. Alliance? Zaft. Erica Simmons shook her head. Then, she raised her hand and pressed a few buttons on the console. A preliminary analysis of the data appeared in front of Carrie's eyes. According to our preliminary analysis, this man-made object that fell from the sky may be a weapon. Weapon? Carrie's gaze turned gloomy. That is to say, before these monsters fell from the sky, they were fighting with an unknown enemy? Yes. Although we are unable to dismantle it in a short period of time, from the exterior layout, we can see that this is an offensive weapon with autonomous induction capabilities. Erica Simmons paused for a moment and then explained further. If you want to find a similar explanation, then in the battle between Yakin and Gao Da, Oracle Gao, they used a very similar weapon system. That kind of weapon? With Erica Simmons's reminder, a scene seemed to appear in Carrie's mind. Several monsters that were as large as the space battleship Grasscatcher were being chased by a mysterious machine with the Dragon Rider system. They fled in panic and eventually fell into the atmosphere until they hit the front line of OBS resistance against the invasion of monsters. Carrie shook her head slightly to stop herself from thinking about it. Did you find anything else? Carrie asked again. Yes. From the appearance of the nozzles, these weapons do not use the propulsion system that we are familiar with. This is also one of the bases for our judgment that this is not a joint weapon or a weapon produced by Zaft. As soon as Erica Simmons finished speaking, Carrie caught on to the key point. One of the bases? There are other discoveries? Yes, Prime Minister, please take a look. This is the phenomenon that we discovered when we analyzed these weapons. It is sending out signals to the outside world that we are unable to decipher. Unable to decipher? Is it because our encryption is too outdated? Deciphering the enemy's encrypted communications has always been a major topic after the invention of radio wave communications. Therefore, when Erica Simmons admitted that the current OB technology was unable to decipher the signals, Carrie immediately thought that the OB Defense Department and Twilight Society's communications encryption technology were outdated. No, although this is one of the factors, this is the first time that these signals have appeared in our line of sight. Before that, perhaps they only existed in theories related to the most cutting-edge technology that we have. Erica Simmons sighed and had to admit that Twilight Society was powerless. Is that so? Carrie pondered for a moment and finally decided to let Erica Simmons continue the analysis. However, before she left, Carrie asked her a question. Director Simmons, what kind of signal do you think these weapons are sending out? Erica Simmons was stunned for a moment and then smiled helplessly. Perhaps they're calling out to an existence that we don't know about? Above the blue sky was the endless dark void. A team full of scars, but with high morale, was gradually approaching the retreating fleet that had set out first and had been waiting for a long time in the predetermined universe. Looking at the signals sent out by the leading ship in front of them, Mina could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. She knew that the seed of the Pillar of Heaven's defense was finally saved. Just as she said, as long as the people were still alive, the Pillar of Heaven's defense could be born again. And in front of the retreating fleet, a flickering light was as bright as the Big Dipper that guided lost travelers out of despair. That is the throne of command. Mina, although it is a little early, but Raymond Kai's voice came from the communication channel. Welcome to the throne of command. Welcome to the Britannia Empire. Empire? The former might not have surprised Mina, but the latter surprised Mina. After all, Raymond Kai's identity in the seed world was more focused on Lux's Knight Protector. The closest background to the Empire was the Scandinavian kingdom. Yes, Britannia Empire. When the time comes, you will understand. Also, Lux is there as well. Before Mina could react, a communication channel interrupted Ray Minkai's communication with her. Kai, there is movement from Earth. The one who interrupted the communication between the two was Lux from the Throne of Command. Lux Klein? The familiar pink hair and voice made Mina's expression change. Long time no see. Miss Lund, Mina Sahak. Obviously, with Sharon's existence, Lux had already learned the details of the Pillar of Heaven's defense. As such, Lakis only greeted him before going into the main topic. Kai, the completed transformation of the son of Pill Slave has entered the airspace where Ob is. This is the image from that time. After the image flashed, the sky was filled with the flames of war. The once beautiful island was now full of corpses. The clear seawater had long been polluted by the turbid liquid flowing out of the huge corpses, and the corpses were pushed to the desolate beach again and again. The camera was the scene of the countless strange and ferocious mechs working together to resist. That is all the main island. The main island has fallen. Chapter 842. The number of alien insects has increased. The first line of defense has collapsed. The 1st, 2nd, and 7th MS teams have lost signal. The 5th and 6th MS teams have lost more than half of their members. They are now retreating to the 2nd and 3rd lines of defense to rest. The battle that started again had entered the 20th hour. In these 20 hours, the Ob Defense Force, who had been tenaciously holding the line, went from being at ease in the beginning to a difficult resistance, to being defeated by the endless wave of monsters. Yes, at last, when the alien insect army gnawed a hole in the first line of defense and penetrated the second line of defense, which was one of the few commanding heights on the battlefield, the Ob Defense Force was met with a disaster. Monsters with terrifying eyes emerged from the endless tide of monsters. In an instant, they took control of the commanding heights of the battlefield. The various heavy firepower bunkers arranged by the Ob Defense Force on the battlefield instantly turned into balls of fire. Beam weapons? No. Standing next to Carrie like a guardian, the towering man said with a solemn expression, "It's laser weapons." Why no? Is it those little monsters that have been hiding among the monsters and haven't launched many attacks? Whether it was the Earth United or Zap's information, they all mentioned a suspicious monster. At this moment, it was the terrifying big eyeball monster that occupied one of the few high points on the battlefield. I'm afraid that's the case. Prime Minister, I don't recommend sending air support. The towering man was silent for a while. Then he pointed out the next order Carrie wanted to give. But Carrie gritted her teeth and agreed with Chisaka's opinion. The monsters that occupied the battlefield's commanding heights and wantonly attacked targets within their attack range with laser weapons were undoubtedly the most deadly existence for the Air Force flying in the sky. As soon as the Air Force appeared in the sky above the battlefield, they would be shot down by the monsters occupying the hills in the blink of an eye. What's there to be afraid of? The line of defense was on the verge of collapse. If the terrifying eyeball monsters continued to occupy the mountains and continue to attack Ob's defense line, it would only be a matter of time before Ob's main island fell. Chisaka. Attack. Carrie took a deep breath and turned to look at her guardian. It's him. After her father, Yura Ashar, had led the previous generation's leader, Obu, to die for the country, she had been silently standing by her side, protecting her, silently supporting Katarura Ashar through all the difficulties she faced. Even when Carrie was in a difficult situation and had to take drastic measures to take back Aubrey, Chisaka still stayed by her side to protect her. At this moment, there was no need for words. As a veteran of the battlefield, Chisaka knew very well what Carrie's orders meant. Chisaka did not immediately respond to Carrie's order. Instead, he raised his head and looked at the tactical screen before him. The screen was quickly occupied by a large number of red dots, and the speed was increasing. The blue dots and labels that symbolized the Ob Defense Force were quickly extinguished. Right now, it was probably the moment of Aubrey's life or death. Chisaka lowered his head and looked at the girl he had been protecting. Yes, Prime Minister. The scorching sun hung high in the sky. At the Ob Defense Force's second line of defense, tanks drove out from cover under the command of the National Defense Command Center. They quickly occupied advantageous positions and launched an attack on the alien insect monsters that were trying to tear through the second line of defense. However, before the tanks could fire their cannons, flashes of light appeared and the tanks were blown up on the spot. All that was left was the convoy engulfed in flames and the road scorched by high-temperature lasers. The 3rd Tank Brigade has been annihilated. In the dense forest, Carrie, who was piloting the Crimson Assault Force, had just walked out of the tunnel when she heard the bad news. However, up until now, the bad news did not seem to be able to sway Carrie. The price that the Ob Defense Force had paid in this battle was too high. Even those who were selected under the implementation of Project Fate and had the potential to become warriors had been lost by more than half. Perhaps this was a price that allowed Ob and Project Fate to be reborn in the flames. However, this price... Chisaka, let's go. Yes, Aubrey had already lost his air supremacy. What Carrie could do now was to seize back Aubrey's air supremacy under the conditions she currently possessed. Therefore, her target was the mountain that had been seized by the monster. Boom! Boom! Behind the dense forest, a series of roars rose into the sky. It was the roar of cannons. It was the rumbling of missiles being launched. In the smoke-filled sky above the battlefield, the moment the grayish-white tracks streaked across the sky, it was the moment when sparks bloomed. It was the monster. It was the terrifying eyeballs that occupied the mountain. Just as Chisaka had predicted, as long as a target that could threaten the terrifying eyeball monsters appeared, it would inevitably be the first target to be attacked. The second wave has begun. Although the first wave of cannons and missiles was intended to destroy, it was more of a probing attack. As the lasers streaked across the sky and intercepted the Ob Defense Force's salvo, the Ob Defense Force's second salvo arrived. This time, Erica Simmons from the Dawn Society was in charge of commanding. Although the terrifying eyeball monster that could fire lasers only appeared for a short moment, Erica Simmons still keenly captured its weakness. Therefore, in the second salvo, some pranks from Dr. Erica Simmons were mixed in. The missile rain that soared into the sky was still destroyed by the laser, but in the explosion of these missiles, abnormal fireballs strangely unfolded in the air. Wind to the southwest, wind force 5. Chisaka lowered his gaze and glanced at the report from the battlefield climate monitoring team. The wind from the force of nature cleverly blew the abnormal smoke from the missiles at this moment and quickly blew the mountain occupied by the terrifying eyeball monster. It was as if dark clouds were pressing down on the city. In this situation, the laser attack from the mountain did not stop. It was still the continuous onslaught of missiles and cannons that exploded in the air, even though the clouds had begun to envelop the mountain in this series of interception attacks. It's a success. The abnormal cloud was not a mysterious weapon, nor was it an advanced weapon from the Ob Defense Force. It was a weapon obtained after additional processing of the metal residues and byproducts brought by the Dawn Society when they produced the MS. As everyone knew, even though the laser had terrifying attack power, the conditions for its use were extremely harsh. As long as there was a trace of unstable climate change in the battlefield environment, the effect of the laser weapon with terrifying lethality would inevitably be greatly reduced. Therefore, the moment the cloud condensed by the metal particles shrouded most of the mountain, a fiercer and more powerful firepower soared into the sky. Under Carrie's gaze, the firepower crossed the sky and directly sank into the cloud of metal particles. In the blink of an eye, flashes of light flickered continuously, setting off bursts of thunderous rumbles. Success? Yes, success. But it was not a success yet. There were too many monsters. Even if this salvo could kill the terrifying eyeball that occupied the mountain, no one could guarantee that, The second salvo was still ongoing. The cloud of metal particles that shrouded the mountain was still growing, But an even more terrifying attack tore through the cloud of metal particles and traversed the sky with even more terrifying power. Not only did it explode the remaining missiles of the second salvo in one fell swoop, but it also slashed down like the blade of doomsday and landed on the small mountain not far away. At this moment, it was as though there was only one color left between heaven and earth, a grayish-white color that only those terrifying monsters would possess, a color that would bring destruction to humanity. The towering beam of light instantly melted the entire small mountain, and at the same time, it also swallowed up the artillery base established behind the small mountain. In that 1 second, the terrifying momentum crushed the sound of the artillery base exploding. Even the missile launchers behind the artillery base that did not have time to retreat were annihilated by the momentum. Seeing the artillery base that almost succeeded in suppressing the enemy being destroyed in an instant, and seeing the huge figure slowly emerging from the cloud of metal particles, Carrie was no longer shocked, because she knew that the enemy had once again revealed a new trump card. As for herself, Aubrey, she had no more trump cards left. The rest, only her and the others were left. Chisaka, let's go. Once again, Carrie gave the same order. But this time, Chisaka understood Carrie's meaning. Yes, Prime Minister. Within the cloud of metal particles, the huge figure slowly moved. It was a behemoth that looked like a stitched monster. Undulating constantly, the hideous body that was stitched together by the grayish-white sarcomas were wriggling tentacles. At the front of the body, there was a strange head that was forcibly stitched together in a triangle shape. What supported such a strange yet terrifying body were as many as 12 sharp limbs. As the sharp limbs moved, the strange eyes in the triangle shape slowly turned and locked onto the human army that was attacking the monster wave below the mountain. Buzz! The moment the air roared, the laser that melted through the small mountain was fired and directly penetrated the 3 core defense nodes of the Aubrey Defense Force's second line of defense. In the violent explosion, the monster army that surged toward the core node did not care about the scorching flames and the still exploding ammunition. They directly rushed toward the Aubrey Defense Force's third line of defense, which was also the final line of defense. The emergency alarm from the final line of defense undoubtedly meant that there was not much time left for Carrie and the others. Chapter 843. Retreat and return to assist in the defense? No. As long as the unprecedented monster was not destroyed, even if Carrie returned with Chisaka and other subordinates at the fastest speed, there would only be one outcome. If the terrifying weapon that could paralyze the entire defense line continued to wreak havoc, there would only be one outcome. As a result, the assault team led by Scarlet quickly clashed with the army of monsters that surrounded the hill so tightly that not even a drop of water could escape. Light beams, cannons, even the battleship sword equipped by Captivating Red became a force that tore apart the monster army and helped Carrie and others rush up the hill. With its shield raised, the M1 Heretic pushed the backpack forward with all its might and surrounded Crimson Assault. It used the beam rifle in its hand to kill the monsters whose heads were wrapped in layers of hard material to reduce the pressure on Crimson Assault. Behind the M1, Murasame, driven by Chisaka, could only wander in the rear position to cover. The Murasame with higher mobility did not follow the tactics of the Ob Defense Force, relying on the high mobility after transformation to attack in a roundabout way. It was not that Chisaka and others did not want to do so. It was that the huge threat brought by the terrifying monster was enough to make Chisaka and others give up the idea of attacking from the sky. Therefore, with Captivating Red as the arrowhead, the assault team was like a sharp knife that opened a bloody path in the monster army that covered the battlefield. Boom! On the bloody path, monster corpses piled up like a mountain. But because of the terrifying number, the M1 heretics guarding Captivating Red's sides also showed signs of exhaustion. The beam rifles they were equipped with could penetrate the large monsters with strong horns on their heads. But the number of enemies was too many to count, enough to make the energy backpack equipped by the M1 heretics fall into a state of rapid consumption. Ka. Lady Carrie, please continue forward. In the impact, an M1 heretic on the right side of captivating red startled Carrie, who was focused on the assault. When Carrie snapped out of her daze and looked at the bottom left corner of the main screen, the M1 heretic caught up with her. It accelerated out of the formation, flew past captivating Scarlet's assault, and crashed into the horde of monsters in front of it. In that instant, Carrie clearly saw the terrifying scene of the M1 heretic being crawled all over by those small alien insects. Lady Carrie, this subordinate will stop here. Long live Aubrey. The moment the resolute voice resounded through the communication channel, the M1 heretic that was crawling with alien insects exploded. Boom! The towering ball of fire. It was the shockwave that tore a hole in the middle of the alien insect monsters. Carrie was stunned for a moment. Self-detonation. Although Carrie was mentally prepared to sacrifice herself, she did not expect her subordinates to use such a decisive method to walk to the very end. Prime Minister, Carrie, we have to hurry. In the rear, the special Murasame driven by Chisaka filled the position of the self-destructing M1 heretic in time. At the same time, he also sent a reminder to Carrie. She was stunned for only a split second. In the next second, without a trace of struggle on her face, she decisively piloted the Scarlet Assault and dashed through the burning fireball. She knew this was the first of her subordinates to self-destruct, but she would not be the last. Time passed by little. The final line of defense set up by the Aubrey Defense Force on the main island was also on the verge of collapse under the attack of the alien insect monster army. In addition to Carrie and the others who were trying to rush to the hill, the Aubrey Defense Force itself was also trying to stop and save the final line of defense from collapsing. The missiles and cannons that soared into the sky, and even the tanks that kept coming out of the underground facilities were proof of the Aubrey Defense Force's final efforts. However, the behemoth entrenched on the hill was like a demon toying with fools. It coldly looked at the Aubrey Defense Force's constant struggle. Then, the three huge eyeballs slightly bent down and sprinkled a terrible light that burned everything in the world. In an instant, all the efforts of the Aubrey Defense Force were destroyed. Is it over? The final effort was in vain. The humans sitting in the command center almost lost their courage. Even Director Erica Simmons, who temporarily found a way to restrain the monsters that could shoot the terrible laser, was the same. No matter how fast the clever regulator's brain worked, she could no longer find a way to resist the laser shot by the behemoth at the moment when the final line of defense was about to collapse. Director, is there any other way? We can't resist the monster's attack at all. If this continues, let alone the main island, I'm afraid even Bright Night will be attacked by these monsters. Major General Aubrey, who temporarily replaced Carrie in command, looked at Erica Simmons next to him. Simmons sighed. There's no other way. The monster's attack is too powerful. The cloud of metal particles we temporarily put together can't resist the terrifying laser attack at all. After a pause, Simmons smiled helplessly. Now, we can only pin our hopes on the Prime Minister. This was the last hope, and the most helpless hope. The island where the mass accelerator Bright Night was located was already operating at full capacity. It strived to send the seed selected by the Destiny Plan into space in the shortest time possible. As for the people who were not selected by the Destiny Plan, there was probably only one ending for this. Simmons, who thought this, stared at the screen. Over there, a flash of light appeared. It was the assault team led by Carrie. No, it should be the direction of the Suicide Squad. Lady Carrie, let me pave the way for you. The rest is up to you. The same figure, the same scene. An M1 heresy with wounds all over its body and a broken right arm sped past, captivating Red's attack amidst the cheers of its pilot. With a resolute attitude, it rushed into the group of monsters. Boom! In the midst of an explosion, the M1 heretics that followed Scarlet and Carrie were all destroyed. No, they were going to die. In the face of the imminent depletion of the body's energy, these M1 heretics did not hesitate to use the same approach. They used themselves as the key to open a path to the small mountain for Carrie and Scarlet. In the thick smoke, Carrie, whose eyes were red but unusually calm, saw the behemoth that easily broke through Aubrey's defense line. "Wait for me. Monster! Aubrey, Aubrey, Aubrey! I won't let you monsters wreak havoc." Chapter 844. Death had never been so close. With the sacrifice of all the M1 heretics, the assault team, led by Carrie, finally made it to the top of the hill and came face to face with the giant monster that had almost destroyed Obja's defense line. However, in front of the giant monster that was looking at them with its huge eyeball, there were still a considerable number of alien insects of various sizes. There were strange creatures that looked like scorpions. They were red all over, bearing their teeth, but had no other facial features. Their lower body was more like a spider monster. They were white all over and looked like an elephant. They were small alien insects that were hiding in the shadow of the monster that was bigger than them. However, these did not scare Carrie. She did not even think of retreating and waiting for an opportunity to strike. There was only one thought in Carrie's mind after witnessing the M1 heretic pilots fighting without any regard for their own safety. Kill the giant alien insect monster. Scarlet Assault waved her battleship slicing blade and continuously cut the scorpion-like alien insect monster in half. Even when the scorpion-like alien insect monster was on the verge of death, it swung its forearm that was as hard as 1/5 of the MO scale and smashed it on Scarlet Assault's body. However, it could not stop Carrie's determination to rush to the front of the giant monster. Boom! The forearm of the monster kept smashing on Scarlet Assault's body, but did not cause any effective damage. At most, Scarlet Assault was jolted by the aftershocks of the attacks and suffered from the impact caused by the collision. Ugh! Her innards seemed to be tumbling around in protest, but Carrie clenched her teeth tightly and focused all her attention on the gigantic creature in front of her. She put all her attention on how to kill it. Roar! The last scorpion-like monster was killed. However, hiding behind it, when the last scorpion-like monster fell, the small, white, and blood-red insect monsters that were lurking around took advantage of the moment when the last scorpion-like monster fell. They leaped up and threw a giant net at captivating Hong. In an instant, Carrie could not help but think of the first M1 heretic that sacrificed itself. It was because these white and red alien insect monsters crawled all over its body that it had the will to die and the determination to self-destruct to pave the way for them. Buzz. Swoosh. However, Carrie and her Crimson Assault did not follow the tragic fate of the M1 heretic. Lady Carrie, continue the assault. Leave the surroundings to me. Leave it to us. Several streaks of light swept past captivating Scarlet, and the small alien insect monsters that attempted to pounce on her were instantly annihilated. It was Murasame. It was the Murasame team brought by Chisaka. Now, only the 4 Murasame brought by Chisaka were following behind Yanhong's attack. All right. Carly nodded. Captivating Red sped up again, waving the battleship slicing blade in her hand to continue her assault. In fact, the battleship slicing blade was not the only weapon in Captivating Assault's backpack. It was just that Carrie did not want to use up her energy prematurely. She did not want to fall into the predicament of running out of energy when fighting against that Colossus. That was why she had no choice but to adopt this strategy. The brilliance of the beam shot. The beam sword flashed as it was swung. They became the brilliance of the Murasame team, led by Chisaka, to open up a path for Carrie and Captivating Red's assault. The monsters with sharp horns on their heads were either pierced through by the beam gun or the soft body hidden behind the sharp horns by the beam sword. Among the monsters that fell one after another, it was Captivating Red who was charging with the beam sword. Close, close, close. The Colossus was already in front of her. In the wind of the assault, Captivating Red swung the battleship slicing blade in her hand and looked at the sharp limbs of the Colossus from top to bottom with the beam sword. Swoosh! The attack was very successful. It was so successful that it was beyond Carrie's expectations. The Colossus did not dodge Captivating Red's slash at all. In fact, it did not even show any signs of reacting to it. From the beginning to the end, perhaps only the large and small alien insect monsters that clustered around it would intercept Carrie and her team. In that case, just wait for your death. Although Carrie was a little surprised by this unexpected discovery, it did not mean that Carrie would stop because of this. The battleship's slicing blade swung through the air again, and the blazing beam sword once again slashed at the remaining sharp limbs of the Colossus. This attack, under Captivating Red's full power, broke 3 of them with one slash. The Colossus collapsed as the sharp limbs on the left side were all cut off by Captivating Red. The moment the Colossus collapsed, it was immediately captured by the remaining battlefield situational awareness units at the final defense line. Commander, Director Simmons, something's happening. At this moment, Erica Simmons and General Obu, who was in charge of commanding, exchanged glances. Send out the signal. Tell all units to get ready. As soon as Lady Carrie and her team leave the attack range, immediately fire. Yes, the dawn of victory. Has it appeared? In the sand and dust that splashed up when the Colossus collapsed, Carrie saw the signal from behind the final defense line. But she did not relax because of this. Because in the billowing dust, the colossal and terrifying eyeball was looking at Captivating Red. With a flash of fire, Captivating Red's figure disappeared in front of the eyeball. Almost at the same time, a hole suddenly appeared in the billowing dust. It was a laser. The moment Carrie noticed that the colossal and terrifying eyeball was looking at Captivating Red, she reacted decisively. Dodge and controlled Captivating Red to swing her sword at the monster's neck that was connected to the colossal eyeball. Swoosh! The sword flashed, and the colossal eyeball that could destroy a cannon formation with a single strike landed with a loud bang. Captivating Red, who had succeeded in one strike, turned around and took advantage of the explosive momentum of the backpack at this moment to raise her body with all her strength and stand above the Colossus' head. At this moment, Carrie saw the Colossus below clearly through Captivating Red's electronic eyes. The bulging white sarcoma, the colossal eyeball that was struggling to turn and look at Captivating Red, and the wriggling tentacles. How disgusting! Carrie pushed the push rod with her right hand, and Captivating Red, who was flying in the air, lowered her head and rushed straight at the monster below like a meteor. This attack would be the judgment of the Colossus that destroyed Obu's final defense line. But the enemy would not sit still and wait for death, even if it had lost the ability to stand at this moment. But the tentacles on its back could still touch Captivating Red. Pa! Pa! There were continuous explosions in the air. It was those tentacles that suddenly stretched out and whipped toward Captivating Red, who was still falling. Looking at the impenetrable tentacles, Carrie was not afraid at all. What's more, as long as Captivating Red dodged, then this attack would inevitably fail. No matter how focused Carrie was on killing this Colossus, she knew that if this attack failed, then the alien insect monsters around the hill would inevitably surround them again. This was a sure death situation. Suddenly, at the moment when Captivating Red was about to be hit by the waving tentacles, several beams of light broke through the air and broke most of the tentacles that could hit Captivating Red's vital parts. It was Murasame. It was the Murasame team, led by Chisaka, that once again created an opportunity for Carrie. However, behind this round of beam shooting, Murasame ran out of energy. The blade of the sword broke through the weak tentacle attack and struck the back of the huge monster like a lightning strike of judgment. Blood gushed out at this moment, dyeing Captivating Red. Looking at Captivating Red sliding down from the camera, Carrie gritted her teeth. She seemed to have seen her subordinates, who self-destructed to create an opportunity. Amidst the rolling blood mist, Captivating Crimson Assault, who had been dyed red, once again raised her sword and slashed out. The last colossal eyeball fell to the ground. This huge threat that broke the final line of defense was finally cut down by Carrie's sword. Retreat. Carrie decisively gave the order to retreat. The next moment, it was bound to be the bombardment of the Ob defense force. Ob still managed to hold on. Be careful. Lady Carrie, A violent impact suddenly came. In the rapidly changing scene, Carrie saw an explosion. The Murasame piloted by Chisaka was swallowed by the explosion. Amidst the deafening explosion, Carrie caught sight of a monstrous figure standing on the back of the dead Colossus. The monstrous figure had huge sarcomas and eyeballs on its legs, hair, and a tail on its back. Behind it, several monsters with the same appearance tore apart the body of the Colossus and appeared in front of Carrie. The light of death erupted from those eyeballs, instantly blowing up the few Murasame that had exhausted their energy. No, Chisaka. Chapter 845. It was nighttime. The sea breeze at night was chilly as it blew against Carrie's freshly trimmed hair. The blonde girl who had taken over as Prime Minister Aub for some time was tired. She took this rare opportunity to go to the beach near Ashar's house and stared at the moonlit sea. Beneath her fluttering hair was a pair of tired eyes. Even though she was overwhelmed by fatigue, there was still a sense of determination in the depths of her eyes. Rustle! Footsteps on the beach came from behind her. Prime Minister. The sea breeze carried the voice of the visitor. There's no one else around now. Chisaka. Relax a little. Carrie shook her head slightly and corrected the way the visitor addressed her. The man opened his mouth, but still nodded silently. Carrie. It's done. The tall and sturdy man who had been guarding Carrie said slowly. Is that so? I got it. Carrie responded faintly and did not say anything else. It was only when the full moon in the sky was nearing the horizon that Carrie slowly turned around and looked at her guardian. Under the pure white moonlight, Carrie could clearly see the bloodstains on Chisaka's Aubrey uniform. His sleeves, his collar, his trousers, there were bloodstains of varying degrees. How many of our men did we lose? Carrie's mouth moved, but when the words reached her mouth, they changed into something else. 11 dead. A total of 93 wounded of varying degrees. Chisaka pondered for a moment and added. In fact, most of the targets knew nothing about our operation and were quickly controlled by us. However, when we carried out the mission to wipe out House Sierra, we encountered some resistance. Is that so? Sierra? Looks like Uncle Yuna and Uncle Unad were prepared. If we didn't take action in advance, I'm afraid they would have backfired on us. Carrie chuckled as if she was talking about something so casual that it was nothing worth mentioning. However, Chisaka, who personally carried out the mission to wipe out House Sierra, knew clearly what House Sierra was planning. While the Earth Alliance led by the Atlantic Alliance suffered heavy losses, House Sierra, who had always been in close contact with the Atlantic Alliance, saw a glimmer of hope. They wanted to take advantage of the current situation where only Aubrey's Bright Night was left in a mass accelerator on Earth. They wanted to demand an exorbitant price from the Atlantic Ocean, which was badly battered by the sudden invasion of alien insects. The Sealand family even planned to request the Atlantic Union to assist them in controlling Aub if necessary. Yes, now that the human society was facing the threat of the mutated insects invasion, the Silent Clan's ambition was burning fiercely as the mutated insects swept across America and Africa. You're just an idiot with delusions. Chisaka remembered what Carrie had said when the information was delivered to her desk. At that moment, Chisaka suddenly felt that the naive and innocent girl who only wanted to resolve disputes as long as they reached an understanding had disappeared. All that was left was the new generation of leaders standing in front of their desks under the white moonlight. Just like now, standing on the beach, bathed in the moonlight. Just as the Prime Minister expected. There are indeed soldiers from the Atlantic Alliance in the military base controlled by the Silent family. Just soldiers? Carrie raised her eyebrows and revealed a disdainful smile. They're ready to take over the whole of Aub. Only the soldiers from the Atlantic Alliance were lured in. Seems like I've overestimated the Silent family. Chisaka lowered his head slightly. As a matter of fact, due to the invasion of the mutated insects, our country's patrol fleet has strengthened the patrol of the surrounding waters. So, it's possible that the smugglers from the Atlantic Alliance were stopped by coincidence. Oh well. Carrie waved her hand dismissively, not wanting to dwell on the matter any further. Let's settle this. We don't have much time left. Yes, ma'am, Chisaka replied happily. He turned around and took out his communicator and gave the final order to the other end. Chisaka knew that once the order was given, thousands of humans would die under the gun. The sea breeze seemed to have turned cold and damp at that moment. At the same time, Chisaka put down the communicator and heard Carrie's mumbling. Chisaka, from now on, I can't see the road ahead. What if I get lost or can't walk anymore? What should I do? Chisaka opened his mouth and turned around to look at Carrie. He noticed that there was no confusion in Carrie's eyes. On the contrary, Chisaka saw a clearer light of determination than before. The unsmiling tower-like man said slowly and firmly, "That's right. If there's no road under Carrie's feet, then I'll open a new one for you." Boom. The world said. At the moment of death, humans would see everything in the past, as if they were recalling their entire life experience, walking towards the yellow springs with all the joy and sorrow. In a violent explosion, Carrie saw Murasame blocking the attack for her and captivating red assault. In the burning Murasame, Carrie saw the past and the solemn promise Chisaka made to her on the night he launched the operation against the Silent family. It was as if all of this was the moment Chisaka fulfilled his promise that night. Captivating red assault was forced back by the shockwave caused by the explosion. She had to stab the anti-battleship blade into the ground to stabilize her body. However, before Carrie could make her next move, two flashes of light flashed. It happened to hit the anti-battleship blade in captivating red assault's hand. The moment the anti-battleship blade was hit by a high temperature, it bubbled and exploded. The balance of the body that had just been stabilized suddenly lost its effect. A trace of blood appeared on Carrie's lips. At this critical moment, Carrie, who gritted her teeth, tried her best to push captivating red assault into the backpack and pushed it forward. In the rumbling engine roar, Yanhong hugged Murasame, whose body was blown up on the left side, raised her head, and fired a Vulcan cannon at the burning Murasame that rose into the air. Duh. With a sharp whistle, the cannonballs that tore through the fog of fire crazily hit the huge corpse, causing blood to splatter everywhere. Under the sweep of the cannonballs, the few ferocious eyeballs that broke free from the corpse and almost killed Captivating Red were smashed into powder on the spot. Boom! At the moment when the roar of pushing the backpack passed through the air, Scarlet, who was holding Murasame, stepped on the huge, bloody corpse and jumped toward the back of the mountain. However, before Captivating Red assault landed, a large brilliance lit up behind the shadow of the mountain. It was those ferocious eyeball monsters. Ambush! The attack just now did not kill these ferocious eyeball monsters. Instead, they hid behind the mountain. Until this moment, they appeared behind the huge corpse again, waiting for her to come. Is this the end? At the moment of life and death, the air was torn apart. It was not torn apart by the laser shot by the ferocious eyeball monsters, but a scream from the higher sky. Just in the blink of an eye, dozens of black shadows passed in front of Captivating Red assault from above and smashed into the ferocious eyeball monsters below. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, the fire of purgatory fell from the sky. The target is hit. The damage rate is being calculated. In a slightly dark bridge, combat messages constantly sounded. Surrounded by these combat messages, the silver-haired girl sitting on the captain's seat gently touched her braid. This was a small action unique to her when she was thinking. Madukas, how is the status of the radiation shield? According to the time calculation, those insects should have found the son of the Dan slave. The tall and meticulous first mate standing next to her responded, "Yes, the radiation shield is in good condition. In fact, after the first wave of missile offensive began, the output power of the radiation shield fluctuated. We can believe that we have been attacked by the enemy's laser." "Really? Very good. Then, please search for the source of the attack." "Understood. Now Sergeant Wilbur is already on the deck." "And, right, how is our customer? I don't want to receive the unfortunate news of the customer's death after being bombarded by those monsters." The silver-haired girl turned the braid in her hand and said, very distressed, "You know, this is Raymond Kai's request." When the adjutant heard it, he suddenly coughed twice. "Ahem, Captain. No, Madukas. Now the captain of the son of the Dan slave is you. I'm just here before everyone can grasp the performance of a new son of the Dan slave." Ahem, Captain Teresa is right. After Richard Madukas changed the way he addressed her, he immediately said, "Captain Melissa Mao and Sergeant Siske Xiangliang, who attacked in advance, should have already reached the target after the first wave of missile offensive landed. You know, a few minutes ago, the two who had just completed the operation training mission to familiarize themselves with the new body were stuffed into the missile launcher together with the body. Captain Mao, Sergeant Sasuke Xiangliang, your mission is to be the first to arrive at the target's transformation under the cover of the first wave of missile offensive and activate the radiation shield to protect him until the son of the Dan slave finishes clearing the surrounding enemies." "Understood." Melissa Mao and Sosuke Xiangliang responded in unison. Then, Melissa Mao couldn't help but complain. "Is it really okay, stuffing humans into the missile launcher and shooting them into the sky? Although I'm very confident in my body, I know I'm not astronaut material. Don't worry. This M9X has an inertial control system that can resist 60% of the G-force brought about by high-G maneuvers for the pilot. Besides, the new pilot's driving suit we're wearing also has the ability to resist G-force. So, this isn't much different from a usual ejection takeoff." Compared to Melissa Mao, Sosuke Xiangliang, who had done his homework in advance, was much calmer. "Sosuke, you're always very familiar with these new things." Sigh. Melissa Mao's sigh made Sosuke Xiangliang very confused, but he didn't delve into it. For him, grasping the performance of the equipment in advance would undoubtedly increase his chances of completing the mission. Thus, during the first wave of missile attacks by the sons of Dan Nu, the high-altitude bus that Melissa Mao and Sosuke Sagara were on disintegrated the moment it entered the predetermined airspace. The two new MS models developed by the Britannia Empire and named by Teresa as the M9X Sword of Heaven were completely released. Accompanying them were countless cylindrical devices that scattered in the sky after the shells of the missiles had been peeled off. It was as if a celestial maiden was scattering flowers. Pa! Pa! The moment the pieces of metal were blown away, countless white flowers bloomed in the sky, and the sky was instantly dyed in a variety of colors by the thick clouds. The moment the flashing red light shone on the cylindrical bomb, countless black dots exploded from its body. They charged through the thick clouds below in a denser manner, giving the strange insect monster a grand welcome party. Arrive above the battlefield. Target spotted. He looked down from above. Even without opening the external sound capture system, Melissa Mao could still feel the huge commotion outside. At the same time, her M9X locked onto the target. Zongjia, begin the mission. Radiation shield activate. Roger. At this moment, in front of Carrie's eyes, not only did the attack from the sky wipe out all the monsters, but there were also two unfamiliar machines that activated a mysterious light shield, one on the left and one on the right, protecting Carrie. "Nice to meet you, Your Highness. I hope I didn't scare you." Chapter 846. Target confirmed. Uras 2 and Uras 7 have successfully converged with the target. The report from CIC caused Teresa's hand movements to pause. She then casually tossed aside the braids in her hand, stood up, and waved her hand to give an order. "Notify Uras 6 to pass on the order. The son of Dan Nu is about to fire." "Yes, sir." In the next moment, in the sky above the battlefield where the monsters were wreaking havoc, an undetectable red descended from the sky above the sky cruiser that was protected by layers of green octagonal light screens. It swept past the horde of terrifying monsters below and kept moving forward until it locked onto the white figure that was hidden in the tide of monsters that was hard to detect. "Oh, I've caught you, disgusting little bug." Behind the red was an ultra-long-range beam sniper rifle with a length of 10 meters and several fist-sized cables connected to the power system of the battleship below. The sniper rifle was operated by Eurus-6, the M9XL controlled by Cruz Wilba. It was an enhanced model that was based on the M9X and was specially modified for long-range sniping and firepower support. Eurus-6. Captain's order. Lock onto the target and send back the target's coordinates. The son of Dan Nu is about to launch an all-out attack. Please reply if you receive. The moment the command from the bridge rang in Cruz Wilba's ears, Cruz Wilba had already transmitted all the data to the bridge. Target's coordinates have been transmitted. If you continue to dawdle like this, you won't be able to make it in time for your date. Perhaps it was because of Melissa Mao's presence. Cruz Wilba began to feel a little smug. Eurus-6. Focus on finding the target. But before Cruz Wilba could continue, Teresa's scolding came immediately after. Cruz Wilba was so frightened that he hurriedly collected his thoughts and focused on the mission. Not long after transmitting the coordinates of the two targets that had been observed again to the bridge, Cruz Wilba could not help but mutter in his heart. I haven't seen her in a while. The cute Teresa has actually become not cute. TSK. As he muttered, flames rose from behind him, 9XL, and flew straight to the coordinates that M9XL had locked onto. Buzz. A flash of light tore through the air like a divine sword. As it tore a crack in the sky, it also destroyed all the missiles that rose from the son of Dan's slave. However, this attack was within Teresa's expectations. This was considered the second wave of missiles. It symbolized the feint of the second wave of missiles. The missiles that soared into the air were not loaded with any lethal ammunition. Instead, they were using the same old trick. The missiles exploded one after another in the air, blowing up the smoke mixed with metal particles. At the same time, the smoke covered the figure of the son of Dan's slave, and, at the same time, it blocked the attacks from below at an extremely fast speed. Boom! Boom! In the smoke, dozens of missiles rushed out and flew higher into the sky. Buzz. However, it was still destroyed by the attack from below. In the end, it was still Teresa's trick. The smoke mixed with metal particles grew thicker and thicker. In a short time, it had condensed to the size of a cloud, enveloping the battlefield with the son of Dan's slave as the center. Buzz. Under the thick clouds, laser beams were clearly visible, but they could not break through the clouds that blocked the sun's brilliance and hid the son of Dan's slave. Then, the monster wave below began to move again. However, they did not continue to attack the son of Dan's slave. Instead, they turned and continued to march toward Aubrey's final line of defense. The terrifying big eyeballs that had locked onto the son of Dan's slave also quietly disappeared into the shadows of the monster army, waiting for the next new prey to be locked onto by the alien insects and the beta wave. Little did they know that above the beta army that had begun to move again, above the layer of clouds that blocked the monster's line of sight, hundreds of flowers had already bloomed. Yes, beta used missiles to enter the sky above the target and begin the blooming procedure. Above the clouds, an order from the son of Dan's slave activated the flower buds that covered the clouds. As the tiny shadows were constantly cast above the clouds, the flowers bloomed. Under the pull of gravity, these shadows that had lost the support of the flower buds could only be pulled by gravity. The rapidly falling shadows fell densely into the clouds below, creating small splashes, just like the slight movement before a rainstorm. Boom! All of a sudden, flowers exploded in the clouds. It was as noisy as thunder descending into the world. On the other hand, below the clouds, the monster army that only knew how to rush toward Aubrey's final line of defense did not care about the noise that happened in the clouds at all. Boom! Thus, amidst this disregard, thunder descended. The divine thunder of the ninth heaven that seemed to wash away all the sins in the world came down with a roar, exploding into red lotuses that burned everything in the monster army. Boom! 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 At this moment, the sniper rifle equipped with the M9XL faithfully recorded the scene of burning the monster army with its unique high-performance aiming system. Behind the scope, there was a speechless face. Phew, that's amazing. I didn't expect these bugs to not know how to dodge. They just let the terminal sensitivity bullet explode above their heads. What Cruz Wilbur called the terminal sensitivity bullet was the terrifying barrage released by the son of Dan Slave just now. Fundamentally speaking, this was not the kind of special bullet that Cruz Wilbur was familiar with that was developed for the Steel Torrent, but a special ammunition developed specifically for the Beta Army. Deceive. Spread. Then, make the final decision. This was the design concept of this special ammunition. Through the scope, Cruz Wilbur saw the terrifying scene of flesh and blood flying everywhere, but he was not afraid because of this. Because he already knew the true face of the Beta. Bridge. This is Eurus 6. The clearing effect of the J5 area is not obvious. Now, the target has been adjusted. As the M9XL moved the sniper rifle, the red that hid the eyeball monsters in the Beta army quietly swept past the monster army and once again fixed on the dozens of eyeball monsters that stopped in an open space and were looking up at the thick clouds above their heads. What followed was the terminal sensitivity bullet that broke through the thick clouds and scattered on the dozens of eyeball monsters like a rainstorm. In the blink of an eye, the area where the dozens of eyeball monsters were located not only exploded with fireballs that devoured everything, but also sputtered the flames that could not be easily extinguished. Roar! Although the sputtered flames did not seem to be vigorous, the moment they touched the monsters, they quickly used the monsters that were possessed as nutrients and rapidly strengthened themselves until the monsters were burned to ashes. This scene was faithfully captured by the battlefield monitoring device and transmitted back to Aubrey. In the command center, there was already silence. Looking at the unfamiliar battleship that unfolded an incomprehensible force field and galloped on the battlefield, everyone seemed to have stopped thinking. However, among these people, Director Simmons' expression was uncertain. As Aubrey's most outstanding scientific researcher, Simmons saw the key to the son of Dan Slave daring to appear in the sky with almost no cover. The energy field that could easily block the light attack of the alien insect monsters was the key. However, even if Simmons saw the key at a glance, she also knew that with Aubrey's current technological strength, it was impossible to achieve this step. Moreover, in this world, the only ones that could achieve a similar protective effect were probably the Moon God fortress built with the umbrella system that the Eurasian Union was proud of during the First War, and the Genesis protected by the PS armor supported by Zaf's powerful energy output during the Battle of Yukindue. Whether it was the former or the latter, to achieve such a heaven-defying protective ability, it was necessary to have a sufficiently powerful energy output device. However, Aubrey could not do this, let alone integrate this set of energy output devices that could support such a powerful protective ability into a 100-meter class battleship. From this, it could be seen that this unfamiliar battleship that suddenly appeared in the sky above the battlefield already had technology that was ahead of Aubrey's. I hope it's not an enemy. In front of her, the situation on the battlefield had begun to reverse due to the appearance of the son of Dan Slave. This made Simmons sigh inwardly. The worry in her heart was probably impossible to communicate with others at this moment, because Aubrey, who had almost fallen into the abyss of eternal damnation, saw the dawn of hope, the burning of flames, the roar of explosions. It became the main theme of hunting down the Beta army. Except for Melissa Mao and Sosuke Sagura, who set off first, and Kreutz Wilba, who was searching for targets on the deck and leading the attack, the son of Dan Slave did not send out a second team. He continued to float above the clouds, scattering missiles to clean up the battlefield toward the Beta army below. Area A1 cleared. Area C3 cleared. Area E6, there are still a few enemies remaining. Arranging the next round of firepower. On the bridge of the son of Dan Slave, an orderly report rang out. This made Teresa nod involuntarily. Madukas, it seems that everyone has begun to control the power of the new son of Dan Slave. Yes, Everyone is trying to get familiar with the new son of Dan's slave. After all, we don't want to disappoint you, Captain. Teresa shook her head, but did not continue on this topic. Execute Plan E3. While clearing the surrounding enemies, replace the ammunition in the C1, C3 launch compartments, and deploy detectors in the target area according to the original plan. Yes. After supervising her subordinates to carry out this order, Teresa looked at the first officer behind her. Mardukas, are you interested in meeting the princess of a foreign country with me? Yes, sir. Chapter 847. Rumble. Rolling thunder resounded through the sky, playing the song of the dead for the battlefield that was full of corpses. The black clouds in the sky were like Mount Tai, heavily pressing on the hearts of all the survivors in this battle of life and death. The battle was won, but the battlefield that was full of devastation and full of corpses told everyone a fact. Today's Aubrey could no longer withstand another battle. All of Aubrey's lines of defense, including the final direction, had collapsed. Even with the help of the sudden appearance of the unfamiliar battleship, the collapse of the final line of defense was an established fact. In this case, any experienced frontline commander would give the order to regroup and repair the final line of defense as much as possible. However, under the black clouds, surrounded by the two unfamiliar airframes, the girl who was regarded as the highest leader of Aubrey could not give this order for a long time, because her eyes were always on the wreckage that was almost broken copper and iron. That was Aubrey's Murasame. It was also the Guardian's vehicle that had accompanied the girl through many difficulties. In the broken cockpit, the figure was still tall and sturdy, but it was already dripping with blood, and there was not a good place to be found on the body. The pilot uniform that was supposed to provide protection for the body was even more broken, and large pieces of rotten flesh stung the girl's eyes. However, what the girl couldn't accept the most was that the figure that was torn into pieces by the scars had a trace of a smile at the corner of his mouth. A trace of a smile that completed his long-cherished wish and had no regrets. Chisaka. The girl's voice was trembling. Sadness, like a tide, rushed to the girl. However, as the highest leader of Aubrey, at this moment, she became a dam that resisted this tide of sadness, constantly bearing the impact of that sadness. Her increasingly hazy eyes fell on the broken figure, watching the last moment of the Guardian in the world. Suddenly, the girl's eyes trembled. She saw a stain on the ground, a piece of blood red. Stain. That was a stain drawn with bright red. At this moment, the dam built by the highest leader of Aubrey collapsed, and could no longer resist the surging tide of sadness. Tears quietly slid down the girl's cheeks, dripping on the charred and broken wreckage, splashing up a little bit of dust. Chisaka, you idiot! The young girl couldn't help but fall to the side of the cockpit, her right hand powerlessly hammering the charred steel plate. Thousands of words rushed to his throat, but he couldn't say a single word, a single sentence. All that was left was the girl's low whimper. Rumble. The lightning in the sky was still galloping above the dark clouds. When the loudest thunderclap tore through the sky, the battlefield that had been ravaged by the flames of war welcomed a torrential rain. A rainstorm to bid farewell to the dead. Pada! The bean-sized raindrops fell on the broken Murasame, splashing smoke and dust. The girl who was crying in a low voice accidentally saw that the raindrops sprinkled on this battlefield were black. The young girl abruptly raised her head, only to see an octagonal light shield emitting a green radiance between her and the black clouds, blocking the black rain that poured down in torrents. It was the two unfamiliar airframes that had suddenly appeared on the battlefield and saved the girl's life. I'm sorry. This black rain was not within our expectations. In the black rain, two figures quietly appeared, stepping on the water mixed with blood and black rain, standing beside the broken Murasame. This Aubrey defense battle was over. The report about this battle was also sorted out by the intelligence personnel on the son of Dan's slave and sent to the throne through the Empire's intelligence network and placed in front of Ray Minkai. Looking at this report, Ray Minkai fell into a long silence. The actions of Beta were not unexpected. Since Ray Minkai came into contact with the worldview of the MUV series, he knew that Beta, a race that was always jokingly called by the audience as cosmic miners, was impossible for humans to reach a settlement. Therefore, Ray Minkai didn't pay much attention to Beta. What he cared about was the information collected by the intelligence personnel of the Son of Dan Slave under the leadership of Teresa from Aubrey. At the top of the list were the many records about Aubrey since the outbreak of the X1 Rift crisis. Among them, there were records about the disappearance of Minerva and the Pillar of Heaven since the outbreak of the X1 Rift crisis. The time span was about 2 years ago and 1 year and 6 months. It had to be said that this record caught Lei Mingkai's attention and confirmed some of his speculations. In the midst of the buzzing sound, a hazy figure quietly appeared. It was Mimi, whom he had not seen for a long time. Oh, what a rare guest! When Ray Minkai saw that the person who came was Mimi, who claimed to have gone out alone to search for information, he put down the information in his hand and got up to greet her. Of course, this was just a holographic projection from an unknown place. Except for Nana, no one could know where Mimi was now. Mimi looked around and couldn't help but nod her head. I didn't expect an Empire Prince like you to know how to enjoy yourself. I heard that not only did you take Minerva into your pocket, but you also took in the remnants of the Pillar of Heaven's army. Ray Minkai shook his head. He knew that Mimi was just teasing him. As a member of Steel Plum, Ray Minkai could understand the meaning behind Mimi's words. Moreover, Mimi did not give Ray Minkai a chance to be humble. That's all for the opening remarks. Now let's talk about my findings. Ray Minkai raised his eyebrows, turned around, and sat down on the sofa, looking like he was all ears. Nana should have warned you about the current situation of this world. Yes, from the series of events where we discovered the Minerva and the Pillar of Heaven, this world seems to be caught in an indescribable time vortex. Yes, in fact, this vortex is about to reach a threshold. Mimi raised her hand and opened a projection. This is the conclusion I came to after searching for various time anomalies alone. Time anomalies? Are they space-time anomalies? Ray Minkai pondered for a moment and voiced his doubts. Similar, but not the same. Mimi nodded, and the projection screen in front of her changed several times before stopping at a graph, with several peaks marked out. Time anomalies are just abnormal events that are discovered in the great world due to various reasons. As long as it's properly guarded, it won't cause serious problems. Yes, it's like using a pencil to point at a white piece of paper and then being erased by an eraser. And space-time anomalies are destined to be a disaster from the beginning. A disaster that's enough to destroy a world. Ray Minkai blinked and added a sentence according to Mimi's previous analogy. Like a world-famous painting that was splashed with paint and turned into scrap? Mimi shrugged. That's pretty much it. Then, she pointed at the peak numbers on the graph and said one by one, "This is the space-time fluctuation left behind when the Minerva's distress signal appeared. This is the space-time fluctuation detected by the Throne of Governance when the Pillar of Heaven was discovered," Mimi said as she gestured. The difference between the values of these space-time fluctuations is getting smaller and smaller. As time passes, I'm afraid that in the near future, they will become completely identical. At that time, the world where the Minerva, the Pillar of Heaven, was originally in, might be completely merged with this world. We're already prepared for this. Yes, when he learned of the existence of the Minerva, Ray Minkai had been making all kinds of preparations. No, it's not enough now. Mimi waved her hand. No one can guarantee that this is only a fusion that exists only between two worlds. More than multiple. Ray Minkai's eyes flashed. The unknown was far more powerful and terrifying than what was on the surface. If it was really as Mimi speculated, Ray Minkai, no, the Britannia Empire's preparations for this were far from enough. That's true. But based on the current situation, you and Euphemia's preparations should be able to deal with the next development. As for the future, we'll talk about it when the time comes. Himimi clapped her hands, turned off the projection screen, and made a casual, stretching motion. I'll leave this to you. I'm leaving in less than 10 hours. Leaving? A new round of intelligence gathering? No. I'm going to Jupiter. Himimi smiled and said casually, That's right. I got a piece of data from the teacher. It's said to be the song of a Jupiter whale. I'm a little curious, so I want to go to Jupiter to try my luck. After a pause, Himimi continued, I've almost figured out all the space-time anomalies in the Earth's circle. The rest are the space-time anomalies outside the circle. That's also in passing. Then, I'll leave the exploration mission outside the circle to you. Thus, Ray Minkai took advantage of the situation and handed the exploration mission outside the circle to Himimi. Himimi didn't object to this. Himimi probably already had this plan when he came looking for her. Half an hour later, a flower of light quietly bloomed in the depths of the void on the right side of the throne. The moment the flower of light bloomed, a figure appeared in Ray Minkai's mind. If this world was about to complete the fusion with that world, then that old fox would also appear. Gilbert Dylandel. Thinking back to the past, when he first met this old fox, Ray Minkai was the only survivor of Yunu's number 7, and he was the doctor who saved the last compatriot of Yunu's number 7. And now, a pale face of fear, his face was listless, a face of sorrow, a face of extreme anger. These faces kept passing by the spaceport of the colonial satellite of Plant's capital, April City. He brought a human called the Abu refugee to this friendly country that was willing to open its borders and temporarily accept the Abu refugees. However, this friendliness wasn't free. Tens of thousands of refugees could escape from Earth to Plant, but less than 100,000 people could enter the refugee area of Plant's capital, April City, to temporarily live. In order to accept this group of refugees, April City mobilized almost all the forces that could be mobilized and tried their best to guide this group of refugees into the refugee area smoothly. Noisy and boiling voices, strange faces of all kinds, hurried figures, all telling the people of April City one fact. Earth, I'm afraid, has already fallen. Earth, has it already fallen? Mayu, I remember that your hometown is Abu, right? Somewhere on a high platform, a gaze hidden under a hoodie looked down at the Abu refugees who had lost their homes with pity. Beside him, a girl wearing a Zaft red dress with dark brown hair, tied into a single ponytail, shook her head slightly. No, based on the information that Zaft has so far, the attack of those bugs seems to have been blocked. Is that so? Yes. Miss Laxkline. What's more, Zaft is saying that the fleet led by the Holy Lion Knight has completed the mission of clearing out the universe around Plant and is about to return to prepare for a new round of combat missions. When the girl in the red dress mentioned the Holy Lion Knight, the eyes hidden under the hoodie seemed to fluctuate slightly. However, it was only a slight fluctuation. What the owner of this pair of eyes cared about was the increasingly noisy crowd below that was beginning to become a little restless. She knew that now was the time for her. No, it was that name's turn to appear. Yes. Then, it's time for us to appear. Mayu. Yes. Miss Laxkline. Chapter 848. The black rain had receded, and when the sun once again scattered on the battlefield, the land submerged by the black water quietly lit up with scattered lights. These lights were either shining above the black water, hidden in the shadows of the corpses, or simply falling into the depths of the black water, completely drowning their tracks. Although they were scattered everywhere, the body of these lights was a special warhead launched by the son of Dan Slave, a crustal vibration detection device. For the son of Dan Slave's list of weapons, these devices were not one of them. It was just that when it came to beta, these special devices would have a unique enemy detection effect. The expansion of a device has been completed, and the crustal vibration detection network has been established, now accepting the first set of detection data and analyzing it. The son of Dan Slave began to carry out real-time monitoring of the crustal vibration around Ob step by step. At the same time, The moment the detection network was completed, it was also fed back to the throne in the void through the Empire's intelligence network. Kai, the son of Dan's slave, has temporarily repelled the Beta army that attacked Ob. Is this the original support plan? Sharon stood next to Ray Minkai and leaned over to watch Ray Minkai process the information. Even further away, Mina, who had finished arranging the remnants of her forces, looked at the strange duo in surprise. If Mina did not know that Sharon next to Ray Minkai was just a holographic projection, she would be even more surprised. After all, Sharon's current image was the most sacred and dignified goddess among the three images. Of course, Ray Minkai, who was focused on the information submitted by the son of Dan's slave, did not notice this. Well, carry out according to the original plan. Beta is just a group of stubborn bugs. After Ray Minkai raised his hand to cancel the projection screen in front of him, he pondered for a moment, replying to the son of Dan's slave. Teresa did a good job with the arrangements. While the son of Dan's slave's newly modified radiation shield achieved the expected effect, he did not forget to monitor and guard against the underground offensive that Beta might take. But this is just a precaution. After a pause, Ray Minkai looked at Mina. Mina, from your experience, how much combat power do you think Aubrey will have after this battle? The moment Ray Minkai asked this question, Mina's expression turned ugly. Be it Obu or Mina's heavenly ward pillar, both of them appeared to be in a difficult position against the invaders of the Beta. Especially in the face of the overwhelming Beta army, the human soldiers would always be shaken, which would lead to unfavorable factors that would change the entire battle situation. I'm afraid there's only 30% left. As Ob's war god of shadows, Mina naturally knew the composition of Ob's defense forces. However, it was also because of this that Mina knew the predicament Aubrey was facing with the final line of defense on the brink of collapse. Afraid, Ray Minkai felt that Mina's answer was a little off. The moment when the pill slave's son entered the battlefield was very subtle. It just so happened that Aubrey's final line of defense collapsed, and the Beta army launched another fierce attack. The son of the Dan slave, who had a commanding position, was naturally able to grasp the entire situation of the battlefield. 30%. This was probably Mina's last bit of confidence in Ob. Thinking of this, Ray Minkai turned to look at Sharon. Get ready. Yes. After Sharon responded, she disappeared into a stream of light. Looking at the stream of light that gradually dissipated, Mina slowly exhaled. Even though she was surprised, Mina still felt a great deal of pressure from Sharon's strange existence. This was not because Mina was afraid of Sharon's existence, but because she was cautious of the unknown. Kai Chisaka is dead. The man who was like a nanny, wandering around Carrie all day long, is dead? Mina sighed as she told the last thing mentioned in the intelligence. Lei Minkai was silent for a moment and couldn't help but nod. Yes, Chisaka is dead. The taciturn man, who had fought to protect Carrie, had been sacrificed unexpectedly. According to the original trajectory, Chisaka could be said to be the only veteran left in the Ob Defense Force. After 2 wars, among the top few heavyweights in the Ob Defense Force, other than Kira, Mu, and Margot who were outsiders, Chisaka was probably the only veteran from the Ob Defense Force. But now, in this world where the trajectory of the world had changed, Chisaka was sacrificed. In order to protect Carrie, he sacrificed himself. Carrie, I'm afraid she's crying right now. Perhaps Mina wanted to laugh at Carrie, but in the end, she shook her head, appearing to be particularly waning. Then, before Ray Minkai could react, Mina got up and continued. For the next operation, the Pillar of Heaven has no extra strength to participate, but I will still participate in the support operation as an individual. Also, is that ship just going to be left in this satellite fortress? Mina was referring to the Minerva. When she came to the throne of governance, due to her friendship with Ray Minkai and Lakis, the Pillar of Heaven led by Mina did not receive the same treatment as the Minerva. Instead, it received better arrangements. The Minerva? Of course. We will need to use its name for our next operation. Compared to the unfamiliar name of the Britannia Empire, The Minerva from Zaft would lower carries and Aub's wariness. After all, on the official level, Aubrey and Zaft had a diplomatic relationship like that of an ally. Then, let me know when it's time to depart. I'll go make some arrangements. After taking a few steps, Mina stopped in her tracks. Do you think we should let him know about this? As you wish. Okay. On the other hand, after the trio of Ray, True Flying Bird, and Luna Maria had followed Ray Minkai in a battle many times, the Minerva's treatment had greatly improved. It had already completed the final stage of recovery and resupply. Talia could not help but sigh as she looked at Adam, who happily came to see her with the recovery report in hand. In the beginning, Dilindar had intentionally arranged for Adam, who wasn't outstanding in any aspect and was even ignorant at times, to be his vice captain so that he could gain complete control of the Minerva. Perhaps he never expected that the Minerva would encounter such a bizarre experience one day. Did he? Faced with an unfamiliar force that claimed to be the Britannia Empire, this foolish vice captain actually naively believed that the other party would repair and resupply the Minerva for free? He was really being sold off, yet he was still happily helping the other party calculate the money. Talia sighed and looked up. Unexpectedly, she saw the confused vice captain. Adam, you forget it. Just leave the report here. Did that Nike contact us? Knight Commander? No. Half an hour ago, after the Minerva's last resupply job was completed, there was no news from Knight K. Adam was stunned for a moment before he answered subconsciously. Forget it. You go back first. Talia felt a headache coming on. The Minerva that had been repaired and resupplied was undoubtedly a signal. Next, it would probably be the Minerva's turn to pay the price. After a while, Talia called out to Adam, who had one foot out of the office. "All right. Ray, where are they?" Adam responded and instinctively turned back to the office. "When I came over just now, I happened to meet True Flying Bird. I heard that they're going to Naku in this stronghold to take a look at that Knight K's body." "Body? Or that Knight K's body?" "Yes. Do you need me to call them back?" Talia opened her mouth, but gave up in the end. Forget it. Let them go. People had to lower their heads when they were under someone else's roof. What's more, when the other party seemed to have the intention of recruiting, Talia really couldn't put on a resolute attitude. Sigh, what headache? Unfortunately, True Flying Bird didn't know about Talia's headache. Instead, his attention was attracted by the Lancelot King's sword that was parked in the middle of Naku and had many technicians carrying out maintenance work. When the pure white, gold-rimmed outer armor was removed, True Flying Bird saw the internal results of the body that was completely different from his, Ray's, and Luna Maria's body. As soon as this thought appeared, True Flying Bird subconsciously shook his head and threw it to the back of his head. "Are you interested in going up and giving it a try?" Suddenly, a voice startled True Flying Bird. "Who is it?" True Flying Bird subconsciously put on a defensive posture, but when he saw the person's face clearly, he froze awkwardly in mid-air, causing the person to reveal an apologetic smile. "Sorry, I didn't expect to scare you. This is my fault." The eyes under the mask revealed an apologetic brilliance, causing True Flying Bird to wave his hand repeatedly and let out a few silly laughs. "No, I was too fascinated by it. It's not your fault, Night Chief. Besides, if this were to spread to the instructor, I would be badly reprimanded." "Instructor? I don't know who it is." In the dark, Ray Minkai felt that he seemed to know the instructor that True Flying Bird was talking about. Our instructor's name is Nigal Amify." Although True Flying Bird was a little surprised why Ray Minkai would be interested in his instructor, he still said the name that Ray Minkai was very familiar with. "Nigal? I didn't expect your instructor to be that guy." This time, it was True Flying Bird's turn to be surprised. It wasn't difficult for him to see from Ray Minkai's words an expression that this man who called himself Night K and wore a mask and didn't show his real face seemed to know his instructor, and it was the kind of relationship that wasn't shallow. "Okay, it's just a matter of the past." After sighing, Ray Minkai didn't continue to talk about Nigal changing his identity and becoming the instructor of the Minerva Trio. "True Flying Bird, Are you interested in going up and taking a look? Of course. For some reason, except for me, no one else can drive the king's sword. You can go to the Sword of Firmament next to it. Sword of Firmament. Under the guidance of Ray Minkai, True Flying Bird found that next to Lancelot's Sword of Firmament, there was a silver-gray airframe that was similar in outline, but completely different in details. I heard that the airframe here seems to recognize people. As someone who had followed Ray Minkai to battle, True Flying Bird naturally knew the existence of the ALDNOH reactor. Therefore, he also knew the first characteristic of the ALDNOH reactor. Take it. This is a token. Token, yes. A token that can allow you to temporarily drive the Sword of Firmament. Chapter 849. The black rain that covered the heavens and the earth and enveloped Ob slowly faded away. The land that was once again blessed by the sun had lost its former prosperity. The coastline of Ob's main island was filled with rotting corpses. Behind the coastline, the once prosperous city that was now in ruins was in a tragic state. The warm sunlight did not bring warmth to the survivors of Ob's defensive battle. Instead, it made them feel even colder. Every second, there were severely injured people who died. Every second, there were new victims who were found from the rubble. Every second, standing on the ground that was cleared temporarily, standing in front of the tent of the Temporary Rescue Command Center. Carrie's expression was silent. Her gaze fell on the pile of rubble not far away, silently watching the rescue workers who were searching for survivors on the rubble. Behind her, Chisaka's body was already covered with a white cloth, waiting for the next step. Prime Minister, although it's a little unreasonable, you should probably focus on adjusting the defense now. I'm afraid that those bugs will attack again soon. At this time, a somewhat unfamiliar but clear voice sounded. Carrie, who was silently watching the rescue work, suddenly moved, a trace of light appearing in her eyes. Yes, I know. Just now. I've already ordered people to prepare. Carrie, whose face gradually regained some color, first nodded, then sighed. But I'm afraid our strength is no longer enough to defend this main island. In the battle not long ago, the 3 lines of defense of Ob's main island have been destroyed in name only. Even the final line of defense that was barely reinvigorated by the intervention of the son of Danslave was the same. The Ob Defense Force's combat power had reached the point where it was stretched to the limit. After a pause, Carrie looked at the person who came. It was a young girl wearing a white military uniform with a gorgeous golden pattern. Her name was Teresa Testarossa, a young girl who claimed to be the captain of the son of Danslave. Thank you for your help just now. If not for your appearance, the main island would have fallen. And when the words came to her mouth, Carrie could not help but recall the last scene of Chisaka. No, you're welcome. We're just following orders. Acting under orders? Carrie pondered for a moment before looking up at the silver-haired girl. Is it convenient for you to tell me where you belong? Teresa smiled and pointed at the sky mysteriously. Someone will personally answer this question for the Prime Minister. Sky. Startled, Carrie instinctively thought of a possibility. Zaft. Plant. In the next second, she immediately rejected this possibility. The existence of the Sons of Danslaves was not a warship that the various factions that Carrie was familiar with could create. Even Minerva, who had gone missing in the X1 rift during her first voyage 2 years ago, could not compare to this mysterious warship hovering above the main island of Orb. In that case, where did this silver-haired girl in front of him and this warship called the Child of Pill Slaves come from? Teresa seemed to have noticed Carrie's confusion and shook her head slightly. Prime Minister, now is not the time to be concerned about our identities and origins. You only need to know that we bear no ill will towards Aubrey and you, and that we will stand on Aubrey's side and assist him in overcoming this crisis. That will be enough. Carrie was silent for a moment before nodding. I understand this point. Then, I will have to trouble you next. As she spoke, Carrie looked to her left and right, and a trace of determination gradually appeared on her face. The main island can no longer organize an effective defense. Next, we must retreat to the island where Huey is and gather all of our remaining forces. Will there be reinforcements? Teresa seemed to be implying something. Carrie subconsciously looked up at the sky and then showed a helpless, bitter smile. At the beginning, there might be. But now, I can't say for sure. Naturally, Teresa noticed Carrie's little actions. She knew that the reinforcements that Carrie mentioned were likely the Zaft mentioned in the information provided by Ray Minkai. However, due to the lack of understanding of the current situation, Ray Minkai did not speculate whether a fleet would be dispatched to support Aubrey when he noted the information about Zaft. Right now, after noticing Carrie's expression and words, Teresa was almost certain that this broken country had no other reinforcements other than the son of Dan's slave. Far above the ninth heaven, a silver shadow shuttled through the asteroid belt around the throne of domination. So fast, the young man's exclamation echoed in the silver phantom. The pair of red eyes flashed with 30% nervousness and 70% excitement. Real flying bird, how do you feel? In a cockpit wider than Gauda's, a holographic projection lit up. It was a communication from the command center of the throne of domination. The man on the screen was Ray Minkai, who called himself Knight K. Great. Just after the Silver Phantom completed a nearly 90 degrees elevation and passed over a piece of rubble with a diameter of hundreds of meters, Real Flying Bird, who was piloting this brand new body, couldn't help but exclaim. Originally, Real Flying Bird thought that Polskow Das cockpit was already spacious enough. But after boarding this new model called Sword of Firmament, Real Flying Bird found that the Polskow Das cockpit, which she originally thought was spacious, had become much narrower. As far as the eye could see, there was an unobstructed surveillance screen. When she lowered her head, there weren't many operating instruments. Even the joystick that Real Flying Bird was very familiar with was replaced by 2 control balls. Simple instruments. Surveillance images with a wide field of vision. This made Real Flying Bird, who was sitting in the Sword of Firmament, feel a stronger sense of control than when she was piloting Polskow. Are you used to the control balls? Ray Minkai nodded slightly and raised his hand slightly to signal the technician next to him to retrieve the data while asking. This was a new technology that the Britannia Empire had made a breakthrough. And the breakthrough of this new technology was also inseparable from Royd, who had become a heavy gluer. Of course, this was just one of the many new technologies in the Britannia Empire. Well, it's a little unfamiliar, but after getting familiar with it, it feels easier to control than the joystick. It had to be said that Real Flying Bird seemed to be getting more and more used to the convenience brought by the control balls. Maneuvers that originally required the coordination of 4 limbs to perform could now be done by making slight adjustments to the control balls in her hands. Such convenient maneuverability made Real Flying Bird have a strong desire to explore for a moment. It looked like a child who had just gotten a new toy. Ray Minkai, who saw this, didn't say much. Moreover, the more Real Flying Bird loved the Sword of Firmament, the more Ray Minkai was happy to see it. A few hours later, the tired but satisfied Real Flying Bird piloted the Firmament Sword and slowly flew into the throne of governance. When leaving the cockpit of the Sword of Firmament, Real Flying Bird unexpectedly felt a trace of reluctance. It was as if she wanted to continue to drive this new machine called the Sword of Firmament onto the battlefield. Real Flying Bird, who had personally driven the Sword of Firmament back and forth in the asteroid belt, knew very well that although the extreme flight in the asteroid belt was very exciting and carefree, this new machine's final destination was only the battlefield. Catch! Real Flying Bird. The moment a black shadow flew over, Real Flying Bird instinctively reached out to catch it, only to find that the black shadow was a bottle of water. Thank you, Sir Knight. Real Flying Bird looked up and saw Ray Minkai standing on the plank road not far away, looking at her with a faint smile. Perhaps he had already seen her expression when she left the cockpit of the Sword of Firmament just now. You could just call me Kay. There's no need to add honorifics. Ray Minkai picked up the water bottle in his hand and gestured to Real Flying Bird. Thank you. Real Flying Bird's figure moved, and with a slight push of his right foot on the edge of the cockpit door, his whole body flew to Ray Mingkai's side in the microgravity environment. Then Real Flying Bird reached out to hold the railing, quickly adjusted his posture, and landed next to Ray Mingkai. His movements were extremely smooth. Then, Real Flying Bird reached out to Ray Mingkai to take out the temporary driving certificate that Ray Mingkai gave him and handed it to Ray Mingkai. Seeing this, Ray Mingkai reached out to take the token and asked casually, "How does it feel?" "Very good. It feels very powerful." After taking out the water bottle and drinking a mouthful of water, Real Flying Bird's tiredness was slightly better. "It's even better than my pulse gow, duh." Recalling the driving experience just now, Real Flying Bird's reluctance to part seemed to be a little stronger. Is that so? However, this child is far from reaching the level where he can go offline. Right now, it's only in the experimental stage. What Real Flying Bird did not expect was that the body that made him feel so satisfied was only in the experimental stage. This made him feel incredulous. "You can't believe it?" Ray Mingkai smiled, but did not explain anything. Instead, he said something else to divert Real Flying Bird's attention. "We received information that Aubrey was attacked by the group of insects and is in a critical situation. Therefore, the Minerva will go to Aubrey in 36 hours to provide support." Sure enough, Aubrey, this country was undoubtedly a lifeline for Real Flying Bird. Even if the Real Flying Bird in front of him had changed the original trajectory of fate and did not leave a lifetime of regret in Aubrey, he still had an inexplicable feeling for Aubrey. What? Aubrey was attacked. Or was it an attack by Beta? Yes. Streams of light fell. Images recorded by the son of Dan's slave appeared in front of Real Flying Bird's eyes. As the images continued to change, the eyes of the young man who was born in Aubrey, grew up in Aubrey as a child, and was forced to leave Aubrey because of the war in his youth burst out with the brilliance of anger. Chapter 850. The preparations for departure had been completed. Just as Talia expected, the Minerva had been requisitioned by Knight K. "Captain Talia, the Minerva's material reserves and spare parts for MS are all in place. When the time comes, your ship will be our reinforcements and support Aubrey." What Talia did not expect was that the mission in front of her that she could not choose was actually a support mission for Aubrey. Wait. Sharon, Madam Sharon, you're saying that the Minerva's upcoming mission is a support mission for Aubrey? Talia was shocked at first, then immediately more questions emerged in her mind. Sharon had already expected this. In the end, it was all caused by the intelligence control of the Minerva by the Imperial throne. Ever since Sharon used her powerful electronic warfare ability to suppress the central system of the Minerva and control it to enter the Imperial throne, everyone on the Minerva, including Talia, could only know what the Imperial throne wanted them to know. Other than that, they knew nothing. Yes, not long ago, our Empire discovered Aubrey's location and investigated the battle between Aubrey and the Beta. Although our Empire has sent reinforcements, based on the information we have received so far, I'm afraid that Aubrey will not be able to resist the next invasion of the Beta army. Information about Aubrey came out from Sharon's mouth one by one, and at the same time, videos uploaded by the son of Dan's slave were displayed in front of Talia. At this point, Talia reluctantly let go of the doubts in her heart. "So, you want to borrow the name of the Minerva? No, I should say the name of Zaft, to intervene in the war between Aubrey and those insects. We don't want to make things too complicated. After all, borrowing the name of Plant and Zaft, who have a traditional friendship with Aubrey, is easier to accept than directly using the name of the Britannia Empire." Talia pondered for a moment and finally nodded. "Fine. This is also the price to repay the various materials you have lent us." Looking at the stubborn Talia, Sharon just smiled faintly and disappeared in front of her. To an artificial intelligence like Sharon, Talia was nothing more than a futile struggle in her hands. As long as Sharon was willing, this new battleship that had gathered the essence of all Zaft's technology would be destroyed in an instant. At the same time, on the deck of the Minerva, A busy crew was completing the last round of spot checks according to the pre-departure schedule. The huge body was slowly placed on the deck of the Minerva's hangar under the transport of the mechanical arms, waiting for the next step of the work team's guidance. The pure white body of the Minerva's crew, who had finished their work and had nothing else to do for the time being, could not help but stop and watch. Among them, there was a trio. Isn't that the knight's body? How did it end up here? Could it be? Luna Maria, who was holding a drink in her hand, pointed at Lancelot King's sword. Yes, I heard some rumors. Ray frowned slightly. The Minerva is about to set sail. Is it the return flight? Have you found your way home? Luna Maria immediately asked back. But Ray shook his head. I don't know. But according to the information given to us by this satellite fortress, plant, and even Zaf patrol fleet can't be contacted. Is that so? Real, what do you think? When Luna Maria bit her lips in annoyance, she found that Real flying bird next to her seemed to be a little strange. As a matter of fact, under Luna Maria's repeated calls, the Real flying bird responded in hindsight. Luna Maria, what's the matter? Real, what are you thinking about? Luna Maria wrinkled her nose, looking a little angry. Sorry, I was just thinking about something. Luna Maria did not know. In fact, Real Flying Bird already knew all the contents of the next mission. It was just that the information learned from Ray Minkai made Real Flying Bird's heart a little confused. Aubrey, this was Real Flying Bird's motherland. If it were not for the war many years ago, Real Flying Bird would not be standing here as Zaf's red-clothed elite. But in fact, there were no ifs. The current situation was that Real Flying Bird, standing here as Zaf's red-clothed elite, faced a choice. Hey, once upon a time, Real Flying Bird hated Aubrey's motherland. However, there wasn't much of this hatred left. Back in the days of Skanska, when she received the mission to go to plant from the woman who claimed to be a snake, Real Flying Bird knew that the hatred she had for Aubrey was just a young man's anger at being unable to change the current situation. However, understanding was one thing. The youth's heart was still wavering. Real, you know what Minerva's next move is? On the surface, he was Real Flying Bird's good friend. But in secret, he was the youth who was sent by the old fox to secretly influence Real Flying Bird's life trajectory. Reza Beryl noticed Real Flying Bird's strange behavior. The blonde youth knew very well that yesterday, Real Flying Bird went to Naku alone in this satellite fortress without most people knowing. Perhaps, behind this behavior, Real Flying Bird might know the truth of Minerva's upcoming mission. Yes, I know. Real Flying Bird hesitated for a moment, but still chose to reveal part of the information. Minerva, I'm afraid our next mission is to support Aubrey. What? Luna Maria couldn't help but exclaim. But Rem's face became gloomy. In the distance, a pair of figures were watching the movements of the trio. Kai, aren't you afraid of an accident? The pink girl, who was leaning against Ray Minkai, looked at the commotion caused by the trio below. Accident? There won't be any accidents. Ray Minkai shook his head. Among the trio, the only unstable factor was Reza Beryl. However, the foundation of this unstable factor was to establish contact with Plant and that sly old fox, the chairman. Therefore, when Minerva had lost contact with Plant and Zaft and could not establish contact again for a while, Rem, the youth born with the same genes as Kurlutz, would probably think more rationally before acting. Fully rational actions that took into account the surrounding factors. Ray Minkai had a certain degree of confidence in this point. Minerva's existence ensures their survival, but at the same time, will it become their shackles? The pink girl, Lux Klein, naturally saw Ray Minkai's reliance. Perhaps that's the case. Ray Minkai nodded, then looked at the pink girl beside him. How's the situation on your side? Has Dr. Serene settled down? When Ray Minkai led the trio to support the Pillar of Heaven's defense, Lux was responsible for contacting the D personnel led by Dr. Celine. Although on the surface, it was under the guise of communication, in reality, the recruitment operation was carried out without the knowledge of Minerva and Talia. This operation didn't have as many twists and turns as Ray Minkai's operation. With the identity of the Sass family from Scandinavia and Dr. Celine's secret help, these D technicians, who were chased by the Beta Army for a while, quickly accepted the suggestion to temporarily stay in the Throne of Command. The shocking scene of the Throne of Command destroying the Zerg's hive, the Cosmic Hive, was witnessed by these D technicians sitting in the first-class audience seats. The shocking lethality caused by the powerful Longsong cannon was still deeply engraved in the minds of these technicians. With the protection of such a powerful weapon in a safe environment, while the technology was advanced, there were also many unfamiliar fields that had never been touched. Under the powerful attraction of unfamiliar technology, the D technicians naturally couldn't escape. They've all been settled in. At that time, Dr. Celine even sighed and said that she could finally sleep in peace. When Lakis thought of the scene where Celine completely relaxed, threw herself on the bed and refused to get up again, she couldn't help but smile. That's good. When Dr. Celine and the others are familiar with each other, give them some projects. In addition, pay attention to the intentions of others and try to keep all the technicians here as much as possible. This sentence was directed at Sharon. Since they had already entered the Throne of Command, Ray Minkai had no reason to watch a group of top technicians representing the cutting-edge field of the seed world, leave. In the void, Sharon's goddess image emerged. Understood. Then, I'll release some suitable topics for them to study at the appropriate time. I'm counting on you, Sharon. While speaking, another white body appeared on the deck of Minerva. The appearance of this white body immediately caused the crew on the deck to exclaim, That's a heresy? Aubrey's body. That's right. That was the gold heresy that belonged to Mina. The appearance of the gold heresy Mina naturally caused a commotion. It seems that what Jin said is true. Luna Maria, next, we will fight in a gravity environment. Our body needs to adjust the parameters. Looking at the gold heresy Mina in white, Ray sighed and made a decision. Yes. Luna Maria responded and then exclaimed in surprise. Right. Where's Jean? His pulse gout also needs to be adjusted, right? I'll go too. Lakis, who saw the actions of the trio, closed her eyes slightly. It seems like we haven't seen Carrie for a long time. It's been a while. Then let's set sail. Let's go save our friend. Chapter 851. Rumble. Dark clouds once again drifted over from the horizon. Amidst the dark clouds, bolts of lightning constantly shuttled back and forth like dancing snakes. Sometimes they crossed the clouds and gathered the surrounding lightning. Sometimes they penetrated the clouds and struck the ground below. Boom! The lightning that seemed to be as thick as a bucket split the sky. The moment it hit the ground, the terrifying energy that erupted from it blasted a large crater in the ground. At the same time, it also blasted at the bloody cloud in the middle of the Beta Army that covered the mountains and plains. Boom! Boom! It was as if the heavens were punishing these terrible monsters from another world. Bolts of lightning constantly broke through the clouds and bombarded the Beta Army below with terrifying screams. However, the moment the bloody clouds rose into the sky, they seemed particularly powerless. The number of Beta players was simply too many. From the 2-meter-tall warrior level to the 66-meter-tall fortress-level Gouda, tens of thousands of monsters were surging along the uneven and dry seabed toward the broken Aubrey's defense line. The sand and dust stirred up by the Beta Army's march could be seen from the rolling smoke and dust on the horizon even without high-altitude detection. However, this was not all of the Beta Army's attacks. At the feet of the Beta Army that stirred up the billowing sand and dust, under this dry seabed, waves of subtle tremors were approaching from afar, quietly launching a shadow attack toward Aubrey from afar. Fortunately, these tremors had already been captured by the son of a pill slave floating above the night sky. Captain, the sensors have found something. As soon as CIC heard the warning from the headset, he immediately turned to look at the command position. There, Teresa, Carrie, and Richard Mardukas were discussing their next course of action. Teresa, who heard the report, raised her head. Report the situation. Carrie's heart skipped a beat when she heard the CIC's voice. Captain Teresa, is it the possibility you mentioned before? The son of a pill slave from the Britannia Empire naturally had a deeper understanding of the beta. Even before he met up with Teresa, the son of Dan's slave had been beaten to a pulp by this group of monsters that had suddenly appeared, just like Aubrey. Yes, the beta would not only attack on the ground. In those monster nests, there were even larger and more terrifying existences. And these individuals have all kinds of strange functions. One of them is the ability to burrow underground and deliver smaller individuals to the vicinity of the target, or even the larger individuals in the central area. Under the CIC's actions, the coordinates of the abnormal signals lit up one by one on the main screen. Teresa slowly explained to Carrie. After the previous exchange, Aubrey's side, led by Carrie, approved of the assistance of the Dan slave's son. Regardless of whether Teresa or the pill slave son was hiding something from her, the current situation made it impossible for her to consider anything else. Everything was focused on how to protect Aubrey as much as possible under the attack of the beta. Carrie's gaze fell on the main screen. Abnormal signals labeled A1 to A2, J1 to H1 flash past. It would appear that those monsters are unwilling to spare any of Aubrey's people. You're right. In all directions. Judging from the abnormal signals displayed on the main screen, these abnormal signals from the depths of the ground had surrounded Aubrey from all directions. The beta army on the ground was just a cover. What made Teresa feel strange was that the information she saw about the beta did not seem to mention that the beta would use strategy. Is it a coincidence? Thinking of this, Teresa could not help but narrow her eyes slightly, and her right hand subconsciously pinched her braid and rubbed it slightly. Or, these disgusting monsters are being manipulated by someone behind the scenes? Is it that person? In an instant, Teresa thought of the body that caused the world to change drastically, and the girl called Anna by Himimi. But on second thought, Teresa rejected this conjecture. If the girl named Anna had such a terrifying force from the beginning, she would not have been repelled by Ray Minkai with the help of the huge energy overflowing from the world's upheaval and once again summoned the brave king. Then, the speculation continued to advance. Teresa constructed one possibility after another in her mind. In the end, these possibilities all pointed to the same guess. The Parliament of Destiny. If the girl named Anna was awakened by the Parliament of Destiny, then these disgusting bugs may also become a pawn in the hands of the Parliament of Destiny. A pawn to conquer the world and destroy the world. Thinking of this, Teresa shook her head slightly and threw these thoughts that could not help the current situation to the back of her mind. Prime Minister, since you have decided to concentrate all forces near the Bright Night Mass Accelerator, then the next thing will be much simpler. What do you mean? Carrie looked at the main screen worriedly. The abnormal signals that pressed from all directions had closed up, leaving no gap at all. The beta army on the ground is a cover. We can ignore it for the time being. The only thing we have to pay attention to is there. Teresa raised her hand and pointed, and an abnormal signal with the calculated coordinates of the surprise attack was locked on. Flames ignited in the sky. The thick smoke from the burning flames struggled to leave clear trails in the air. From the back of the island to the vast and dry seabed. Facing the scorching sun, with a sharp whistling sound, it completed the air maneuver at an altitude of thousands of meters, and with a head-down maneuver, it slammed into the dry seabed below. Boom! Hundreds of missiles surrounded the island where the Bright Night Mass Accelerator was located and drew a circle on the map. These missiles were not ordinary missiles. Among them, there was support from the sons of Dan's slave, highly targeted, ground-penetrating missiles. Of course, with the reserves of the sons of Dan's slave, they would not have so many ground-penetrating missiles. Among these missiles, in addition to the support of the sons of Dan's slave, there were also the ones left by Aubrey himself, pulled out from the warehouse that had never been destroyed. The roar of the earth breaking through was the effect of a special warhead. It tore through the earth and reached the depths of the earth, reaching the many abnormal signals that had long been locked on by the sons of Dan's slave. That was from the Beta Army, a rare super-large individual, the Carrier-class Beta. This time, 4 Carrier-class Betas, which should have rarely appeared in one breath and launched an underground surprise attack on Aubrey from 4 directions. However, these Betas, who rarely used tactics, did not know that Teresa had long been on guard against their actions. The ground-penetrating missiles that broke through the Earth's crust and reached the huge gushing hole dug by the Carrier-class Betas deep underground were proof. Among the broken gravel, the ground-penetrating missiles that reached the gushing hole either plunged into the ground of the gushing hole or simply smashed heavily into the Carrier-class Beta shell that even the ship's cannon could not destroy. Then continuous explosions instantly filled the huge, gushing hole hidden deep underground. The blazing flames of the explosion rolled in this narrow space, rolling again and again, launching a high-temperature impact on all the enemies that should not exist in this world like a tide. However, in the flames that burned everything, the huge Carrier-class Beta remained unmoved. It broke through the rock formation in a seemingly slow, but actually fast way and launched a surprise attack on Aubrey firmly. For the Carrier-class Beta, with a shell that could defend against the attack of the ship's cannon, these high-temperature attacks that could melt ordinary steel were nothing at all. However, was the attack of the sons of Dan's slave limited to this? No. There were all kinds of information, and even the sons of Dan's slave with more powerful weapons would not be limited to this. Among the hundreds of ground-penetrating missiles, there was a special warhead that Teresa had specially arranged to add to them. Freya, this map editor-level weapon of mass destruction, presented in the name of Schnitzer and researcher Nina Einstein, had become one of the equipment sequences of the Britannia Empire's army. Among them, with Teresa's privileges, she was naturally able to obtain a certain amount of equipment. Therefore, Teresa, who once again controlled the sons of Dan's slave, decisively equipped the sons of Dan's slave with all the Freya she could obtain. Until now, the moment had come when she could use this weapon of mass destruction to open up the situation. In an instant, in the flames that scorched everything, a terrifying energy erupted with a bang. A huge gushing hole, the Carrier-class Beta that was firmly advancing in the rock formation, became a thing of the past in the blink of an eye. Along with their disappearance, it was so intense that even without using sensors, one could rely on their legs to feel the great power of this terrifying energy explosion suddenly arrived. The earth was roaring, sand and dust were splashing, cracks tore open the dry seabed, engulfing the Beta army that was rushing through the billowing sand and dust. Whether it was the soldier class or the huge fortress class, they could not stand for a moment under this terrifying power of nature. Rumble. There was only one sound left between heaven and earth. A roar that tore the earth apart. A roar that came from the depths of the ground. Boom! Boom! While the dry seabed was torn apart by the crisscrossing cracks, 3 huge pits with a diameter of at least 1,000 meters and a depth of about 100 meters were blasted out by the explosion of Freya. In the pits that were filled with blazing heat and remnants of terrifying energy that could destroy everything, one could vaguely see charred and mutilated limbs. This blow directly destroyed the Beta's plan to attack Aubrey from underground. Rumble. In the huge crack, billowing smoke and dust suddenly exploded. A ferocious and disgusting huge body rushed out of the ground like a wild behemoth, carrying crisscrossing scars all over its body. In the blink of an eye, a dazzling bright red pool flowed out of the fragmented seabed, and its body slammed to the ground. It was in Carrier-class Beta that was lucky enough to escape Freya's bombardment. However, judging from the scars all over its body, it was already at the end of its road. In the next second, the Beta army that was sacrificed to protect rushed out of the sharp mouth parts, stepping on the ground that was constantly shaking, and rushed towards Aubrey. Chapter 852. The breeze brought the smell of smoke, making the Aubrey soldiers in the Huey defense line gulp. From the first missile to the present, these Aubrey soldiers still could not see a single beta appear in front of them. They only saw the smoke from the missile that almost covered the sky. They only heard the rumbling of the explosion. But as the smoke in the sky became denser and denser, the sound of the explosion got closer and closer, and there was a slight change in the Huey defense line. All combat units, please pay attention. I am Carly Ashar. Thanks to everyone's efforts in the previous battle, we were able to hold on to the end until reinforcements arrived, but those monsters did not give up on killing us. Therefore, this will be our last battle. In the headset, in the loudspeaker, and in the cockpit. At the same time, Carly's voice came. Carly's head lit up. This was the last of Aubrey's strength. There were less than 4,000 Aubrey soldiers who could participate in this defensive battle. There were less than 100 armored vehicles, including tanks. There were less than 5 teams of the MS Brigade, led by the M1 Heretics and Urusame. Not to mention the remaining artillery, missiles, and other firepower equipment that consumed a lot of energy. This was the best that Carly could find and bring out. Now that the main island and the surrounding islands, large and small, had fallen one after another, Carly's trump card had been exhausted. This was especially true for all kinds of armored vehicles, which were supposed to be the backbone of the defense line. On the day of the main island's fall, they were quickly destroyed by the BETs that Teresa called assault level. Aubrey, this is our home. We can't let these monsters trample on our home as they please. For this, I'm willing to give my life and hold the line with you until that moment comes. So everyone, please help me. When Carly's voice fell, the communication was cut off. Along with it, captivating red descended from the son of Dan's slave and hovered over the Huey defense line. Everything was said without words. Carrie's speech before the battle didn't cause any cheers or impassioned words. Instead, there were countless pairs of eyes that had become incomparably resolute, faces that were unafraid of death, and hands that were tightly gripping the handles of their guns and the joysticks. That's amazing. Teresa, who had returned to the captain's seat, pinched her braid slightly. Kukli Ashar is a qualified leader. Richard Madukas seemed to have a good opinion of Carrie. Really? However, he was indeed much stronger than many people. Standing on that bloody battlefield and witnessing the moment her trusted guardian died for her, she was still able to persevere on the front lines. This perseverance is worthy of recognition. From the first time Teresa had seen Carrie, she had noticed the stretcher covered with white cloth that Carrie was guarding. However, due to certain reasons, Teresa would not be rude to ask about these things. However, from the information she obtained from Ray Minkai, Teresa already had a certain understanding of the people around Carrie. But now is not the time to focus on these things. Yes, Madukas, how's the sensor? The lethality of the son of Danu's Missile C tactic was undoubtedly terrifying. However, due to the Freya mixed in with the ordinary warheads, the sensors laid around Huey were also damaged by the violent geological changes caused by the Freya explosion. This caused the son of Danu to lose the monitoring of the surrounding geological vibrations while killing the aircraft carrier level beta that attempted to launch an attack from the ground. It could be said that killing 1,000 enemies and losing 700 of their own, although the loss was only a few hundred sensors. However, it would take some time to re-establish the monitoring network. This was the price Teresa had to bear when she decided on this tactic. Yes, just as the result of the tactical simulation, the entire monitoring network has failed. Less than 1 out of 10 sensors can be maintained. Richard Madukas responded and waited for Teresa's next decision. Hey, Madukas, do you need to play chess? Play chess. Richard Madukas was taken aback and seemed to be unable to react. This scene, in the past, doesn't seem to have happened, right? Richard coughed slightly to hide his astonishment. Cough. I played chess for a period of time when I was young. Then, if the opponent takes a general step towards you, how will you react? Teresa's right hand that was pinching her braid slightly exerted force, and a trace of an arc quietly climbed up the corner of her mouth. Richard Mardukas subconsciously replied, yes. Counterattack. Yes. Counterattack. Teresa paused, and a trace of anticipation appeared in her eyes. I'm looking forward to the enemy's counterattack. That is, if there is really a mastermind behind those monsters. Roar! Stepping on the broken ground, the beta that erupted with bursts of roars continued to accelerate, and accelerate again. Even the rocks and hills that were rumbling due to the violent geological changes could not hide the sand and dust that was stirred up. It was like a bright light in the sea, wantonly announcing the existence of the beta army to the human defenders who were waiting for them. Dozens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. As the violent geological changes gradually stabilized, the beta that came from nowhere emerged from all directions, running all the way along the path trampled by the first wave of beta that launched the attack. Report: the scale of beta has broken through the military scale, and the number is rising sharply. The radar of the son of Dan Slave was constantly refreshing the number of beta monitored by it. Whenever the scale of beta increased sharply to a certain threshold, a harsh alarm would sound. The interval between the number of times even became shorter and shorter. As expected, Richard Madukas nodded slightly. It seemed that Teresa's prediction was correct. These monsters that seemed to only launch a swarm of bees were likely to be manipulated by a mastermind behind the scenes. Otherwise, according to the intelligence, even if the son of the Dan Slave had Freya as a trump card, these monsters would still attack like a swarm of bees. They would not have used a few aircraft-level BETs as bait to lure out Freya, the trump card, before launching more troops into this deadly battle. Madukas, is Wilba in position? Yes. Ura's 6 has launched enemy detection. After a pause, Richard Madukas was a little hesitant. Madukas, is there a problem? After all, they have been partners for a long time, so Teresa immediately noticed Richard Madukas's doubts. Yes, sir. Although the ultra-long-range observation device equipped by Ura's 6 is very advanced, I'm afraid the enemy won't be so easy. Boom! Suddenly, a violent tremor swept through the son of Dan Slave and the bridge. Report: our starboard side was attacked, but it has been successfully defended by the radiation shield. The attack, just now, was just the aftermath of the explosion. What? It's just the aftermath? Richard Madukas was shocked and instinctively associated it with an individual among the beta. Compared to Richard Madukas, Teresa was much calmer. Look, Madukas, the enemy's counterattack has arrived. Wilba, have you locked onto the target? On the deck, under the layers of radiation shields, a pair of sharp eyes were observing the surroundings. Oh, locked on to the target. Position 632,510. Distance 720. The coordinates have been uploaded to the server. Wearing a full blindfold designed for ultra-long-range viewing devices, Kurlutz carefully confirmed the observed coordinates while quickly entering the data and uploading it to the server of the son of Dan Slave. Very good. C3, D1, E1 launch tubes, fire. Above the son of Dan Slave, there were a few more white tails rising into the air. Distance 720? Such a long distance. I'm afraid it's the monster that fought against the Prime Minister. Very likely. However, we can't rule out the existence of other individuals. Teresa pondered for a moment, then asked, immediately load all the empty launch tubes according to Plan C. Yes. Start loading according to Plan C immediately. Looking at the CIC who passed down the order, Richard Madukas clearly felt some changes in Teresa. She seemed to be preparing for another move. Madukas, it seems that we have underestimated the mastermind behind the scenes. No, our eyes missed something. Captain, what do you mean? Teresa put down the braid in her hand and raised her right hand to point to the bottom left of the main screen. There didn't seem to be anything special there. From a bird's eye view from above, it was just a piece of retreating seawater that looked barren. Of course, Richard Madukas didn't think that this was Teresa's random guess. In doubt, Richard Madukas moved his gaze back and forth from the main screen. Then, a flash of inspiration. In the dim underground, there were waves of screams and roars echoing. It was the roar of monsters. It was the wandering of monsters. It was the rampage of monsters. Amidst this terrifying shriek, a pale green radiance that flickered as if it was breathing illuminated the vast space hidden deep within the ground. Boom, boom, boom. In the space, a muffled sound that sounded like a beating heart echoed. In this muffled sound, a footstep that was easy to ignore slowly appeared from the darkness. It stood in front of a ball of meat that emitted a green light, suspended in the air, and slowly rolled like a ball of meat that was violently mixed together. The operation this time has slowed down. My cute pet. The moment the unpleasant screech of metal friction sounded, the muffled sound that echoed in the vast space suddenly stopped, and even the green light fell into darkness. Ha! Don't be afraid. My cute pet. After all, there were always accidents, weren't there? As long as you can complete my mission within the time limit. I won't hold you accountable for your mistakes. I promise in the name of Miss. Chapter 853. The Miss A in the previous chapter was remembered wrongly. The correct name should be Mr. A, a member of the Parliament of Destiny, MR, a tot-a-tot. Boom, boom, boom. Machine gun. Artillery. When the sound of the beam gun once again raged above Ob, it was the most intense moment of the battlefield. The soldiers hiding behind the bunker sometimes fired, sometimes picked up grenades, and threw them at the ferocious and pale monsters that were temporarily delayed by the obstacles not far ahead. Amidst the explosion of the grenades, the unique tearing sound of the machine guns of the platoon followed closely behind, tearing the pale and ugly monsters into pieces. Attack! Attack! The frontline commander lying next to the machine gun shouted orders while delivering ammunition to the machine gunners. Behind it, the tanks turned their turrets and locked on to the scorpion monster that was hiding behind the pale, ugly monster named Misty. Interceptor class. This kind of monster was terrifying enough just by looking at it, but it posed a great threat to bunkers, and even equipment troops. But now, with Ob paying a painful price and the information provided by Dan New's son, Ob's soldiers had greatly reduced their fear of these monsters. At least, they knew what to do when facing these monsters' attack. In the firepower net formed by machine guns and artillery, the smaller soldier-class monsters fell like harvested wheat, revealing the scorpion monsters among them. Then, a beam of light pierced through the air and killed the interceptor-class monsters one by one. Even if a few of these scorpion monsters could catch the incoming beam in time, they still couldn't use their pair of claws that were hard enough to break the armor of the tank to block the beam attack. Buzz. The moment when the air was still hot, the head of the ugly monster in Carrie's eyes was penetrated and fell on the ground with a burst of smoke. Everyone, try to aim at the head. Carrie knew that the interceptor class's claws were nothing to the M1 Heretic, the Type 71 and 72 beam rifles equipped by Murasame. But to be on the safe side, Carrie still gave the order to try to kill the interceptor-class monsters in one shot. The Obia army could not afford any more losses. In the last line of defense built around Huey, every Aubrey soldier, every armored vehicle, every cannon, and even every MS was an unbearable loss. Fortunately, at this critical moment, Aubrey still had a reliable ally to lend a helping hand. In the sky, the clearly visible tail of smoke did not disperse for a long time. Since the start of the battle, the rumbling from the sky had not stopped for a long time. It was a missile attack from the son of Dan New. It was also because of the cover provided by the Pill Slave Son that the Radiant Knight defense line was able to handle the situation with ease. But how long could the situation last? The terrifying might of the first wave of missiles launched by the son of Dan New had been witnessed by Carrie. It wouldn't be the nuclear bomb that Katrina knew of. Instead, it would be a completely new and unknown weapon that possessed the same level of power as the nuclear bomb in Katrina's mind. No, it would likely be even more powerful, especially when Carrie, who was on the bridge, saw Teresa's indifference when she ordered the use of the weapon called Freya. She felt an indescribable emotion in her heart. No, now is not the time to think about this. Carrie, who was sitting in the cockpit of the Crimson Assault, raised her hand and patted her face, forcing herself to concentrate. Chisaka. The moment she instinctively called out that name, Carrie was stunned. She then bit her lip and forced herself to focus on the battle in front of her. Ka! The moment the trigger on the joystick was pulled, a beam of light burst out from the Crimson Assault beam rifle, crossing a long distance and blowing up an interceptor that had rushed to the front of a bunker. Chisaka was no more. Seeing the monsters killed by the beam rifle one by one, sadness rose in Carrie's heart, but her face was unusually calm. Now, she still had something she had to do. The Beta army that was close to the Radiant Knight defense line was eventually repelled. Facing the trenches that were almost filled with the corpses of the Beta, the sound of vomiting could be heard from the bunkers of the human side one after another. After the fierce battle, the human soldiers, who were slightly relaxed, had probably realized that the scene in front of them was already a terrifying, hellish scene. Was it the commanding officers scolding? Not really. Instead, it was a towel, a bottle of hot water, and a big hand patting on a shoulder. In this battle, as long as they failed, there was only death. No matter how young the soldiers were, there were only two results. Either they died, or they forced themselves to grow quickly. The only fortunate thing was that the enemy that fell in the blood-red puddle was not human. Report the consumption of ammunition. Organize people to patrol the front line. Don't miss any wounded. The Beta's first wave of attack was easily repelled, but did not make Carrie happy. Doubt still lingered in his heart without dispersing. Compared to the previous offensive, this wave of attack was too weak and even a little too straightforward. Such a clean and neat retreat was not like the monster race mentioned in the intelligence, who did not know life and death and only knew how to attack to the death. At this time, the communication from the son of the Dan slave rang. Prime Minister, how's the situation in the position? On the screen, Teresa's calm appearance was still the same. The situation is good. Those bugs were beaten away before they could rush to the position. Carrie nodded and replied while checking the damage of the landline. Is that so? Then, there will be an operation next. The detailed plan has been sent to you. Carrie lowered her gaze and saw that there was indeed an icon flashing at the bottom left of the screen. Open brows, then Carrie's eyebrows furrowed tightly. How confident are you? 70%. Carrie was silent for a moment, then nodded. Okay. When the sound of the human artillery became slightly sparse, the Beta that retreated from the human front line did not disperse. Instead, they quickly gathered toward a certain coordinate, like a well-trained army that had received orders. In the depths of the dim underground, the figure was still standing in front of the meatball that was flickering with a pale green light. What? Abandoning the human body to achieve such a great existence makes you so disgusted? You have to know that your hometown has been destroyed by your own hands. The unpleasant, ear-piercing sound of metal rubbing against each other echoed in this underground space, fiercely stimulating the meatball and the existence hidden deep in the meatball. Dong! Dong, dong, dong. The rapid jumping sounded like the beating of a drum, getting louder and louder, more and more rumbling. However, the deafening sound of jumping caused the figure to laugh out loud. Ha 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 ha. Yes, that's it. That's it. Release all of your hatred. Release all the hatred you have for me, Mr. A. That's right. I am the culprit who caused the destruction of your hometown. I caused you, Elizabeth Amir, who should have stood at the top of the empire and been praised by millions of people, to become like this, the culprit who destroyed your hometown with your own hands. Come on, come on, come on. Completely burn your hatred. Completely release your hatred for me. Then, personally send this world to the same fate of destruction as your hometown. In the name of M.R.A. The ear-piercing and high-pitched sound of metal was so crazy and terrifying. But there was another sound that tore this crazy sound apart. Hum! A beam of light poured down from the top of the hall, enveloping the figure in it. Boom! The moment the high-temperature particle beam exploded, it seemed to be frozen, condensing in mid-air, condensing above the figure's head. Sigh, there was a sigh. With a wave of the hand, the frozen particle beam dissipated. The figure appeared again. Why don't you understand? Only in this way can you live up to the name of war you have. Amir. Dong, dong, dong. The irritable agitation continued to jump. However, this irritation did not erupt at the figure, but the battlefield on the ground. Roar. The beta's roar resounded through the sky again. Bursts of sand and dust swept up, accompanied by the large and small beta army that once again showed an increasing trend of numbers rushing into the sky. Rumble. At this moment, the beta's galloping movement on the ground was like a small earthquake. It constantly shook the heartstrings of the human soldiers on the bright night defense line. Looking at the water in the cup on the table that was constantly rippling. Looking at the magazine that was creaking in the vibration and moving towards the edge of the table. Sensing the increasingly obvious and intense tremors coming from beneath their feet, the Aubrey soldiers who had yet to recover from the previous battle looked at each other. In silence, they quickly picked up their weapons and ran back to the battle positions they were defending. Report. The beta is attacking again. According to the radar scan, after the first wave of beta attack, the number of remaining beta was less than 3,000, but this time, the number of beta has shown signs of increasing again. The son of Dan Slave's radar locked onto the beta's movements immediately. In addition, multiple new appearance points have been found in beta A1 and A3 areas. It is suspected to be the beta's hidden reinforcement hole. Listening to the report from her subordinates, Teresa rubbed her fingers and inadvertently began to rub her braids again. Madukas. Look, the pair of black hands are indeed hidden underground. Indeed, just as the commander expected. Richard Madukas stared at the radar scan on the main screen, unwilling to let go of any clues. But something is strange. When her soft hair swept past the wing of her nose, Teresa seemed to notice that something was wrong. Strange? Yes, it's a little strange. Teresa frowned slightly and ordered casually. Except for beta signal screens in beta A1 and A3 areas. Mark them according to the time of appearance of each signal. Yes, Commander. CIC's processing speed was very fast. In less than a minute, the results Teresa wanted were presented on the main screen. What? Is this a declaration of war? Or a provocation? In Madukas's bewildered gaze, a group of words appeared on the main screen. Kilom. Teresa bit her lips, and her gaze became a little solemn. Kill me. Chapter 854. This is a declaration of war. Richard Madukas adjusted his glasses and expressed his opinion. Teresa, who placed her right hand back on the armrest, shook her head. No, Madukas, this is not just a declaration of war. For some reason, Teresa did not completely agree with Richard Maduka's opinion. On the main screen, the words that were connected by many holes made Teresa feel a little strange. It was like a torch that was deliberately lit in the fog. While it was noticeable, it also made people unable to see its true appearance. Continue the battle plan. Yes, sir. Since the start of the battle, the rolling thunder clouds in the sky had spread to the sky above the night sky. In an instant, the sky and earth were pitch black. Only the brief light scattered by the rolling thunder, the burning artillery fire, and the eyes of the monsters that seemed to come from the netherworld were left. Steady, steady. Add flares at any time. The frontline commander of OB commanded the battle with a hoarse voice. Compared to the armored vehicles and MS with night vision equipment, the only thing the infantrymen could rely on in the dimly lit environment was the flares. Buzz. The buzzing sound of the beam sabers resonated through the front line. Monsters that were a few times bigger than tanks fell one after another under the beam swords wielded by the MS. In less than a few minutes, the gigantic corpses blocked this section of the line of defense, making it impossible for the soldiers and armored vehicles to effectively stop the enemy. Infantrymen and armored vehicles withdraw from this section of the line of defense. Leave it to the MS 2nd Squadron. Not far away, Carrie had already noticed the situation and made a prompt decision to give the order. This was a decision he had no choice but to make. If they relied on the MS alone, they would not be able to completely stop the attack of the monsters. After all, there were a lot of small individuals among the monsters. Boom! Boom! Suddenly, just as the infantrymen and armored vehicles withdrew, two black shadows fell from the sky and exploded among the monsters. Amidst the rolling flames, two airframes that were different from the UBMS, but they were not unfamiliar, landed steadily on the newly vacated position. "It's you guys." She immediately recognized it as the M9X that the son of Dan knew was carrying. "We meet again, my lovely princess." Sure enough, it was Melissa Mao who was driving the M9X, as well as Sosuke Xiangliang. According to the battle plan, when the beta launched the second wave of attack, Melissa Mao and Sosuke Sagara must support the Kagaya defense line as soon as possible, and then wait for an opportunity to penetrate the beta army and enter the area locked by the son of the Dan slave. Of course, this goal was very simple. However, according to Teresa's many arrangements, Melissa and Sosuke Sagara would have to cooperate with the MS Aubrey team, led by Carrie, to resist the beta's attack for a while before they could find a suitable opportunity for the two of them to attack. However, Teresa had calculated everything, but she didn't expect that after obtaining the new M9X, Melissa Mao's heart, which was always eager to try things out, would drive this female captain to take a risky step. In the flames, Beta's screams came from the headset, but it did not shake Melissa's tenacious nerves. Right now, she only cared about one thing. Eurus 7, how is it? Has the Lambda drive been successfully activated? Sosuke Xiangliang, who was controlling the landline, was stunned for a moment. He subconsciously looked at the bottom right of the main screen. Yes, the sign representing the activation of the Lambda drive lit up. Z1, report the status of the Lambda drive. It had the same configuration as the M9. When the M9X welcomed the pilot, it would also activate the partner AI to cooperate with the pilot in battle. However, for some reason, the M9X's AI did not follow the M9's instructions and let the pilot name it according to his preferences. Instead, it directly named it according to the order of the production batch number. This point would undoubtedly make Melissa complain again and again, but also made Sosuke Xiangliang feel relieved. Yes, now that the Lambda drive has been activated, the compatibility between the various data and the pilot spirit has reached 90%. Hearing the results of Sosuke Xiangliang's report, Melissa's mouth suddenly curved into a smile. Then Eurus 7 mission begins. The moment Melissa's M9X suddenly erupted with an astonishing amount of heat, it had already rushed 100 meters away. At the same time, the crowded beta in front of them suddenly bloomed like 100 flowers, scattering dazzling red flowers in all directions. Wait, Eurus 2. Our mission still needs to cooperate with Aubrey's MS team to defend. It's not time to attack yet. As soon as he saw Melissa's M9X that had rushed into the beta pile, Sosuke Xiangliang's mind suddenly exploded. He had no idea what was going on at all. If it was Cruz Wilba, Sosuke Xiangliang could understand. But if it was Melissa Mao, it made Sosuke Xiangliang a little confused. Defense? Eurus 7, what are you talking about? Offense is the best defense. What's more, we now have such a powerful weapon. With the help of the Lambda drive system, the bullets fired from the 60mm submachine gun, equipped with the M9X, were endowed with terrifying destructive power. The moment each bullet hit the first beta, it did not stop in its body. Instead, under the ultra-high speed given by the Lambda drive system, it pierced through the beta and killed the next one, and the next one. It did not stop killing the target until it came to a standstill. Thus, in front of Melissa's M9X, there was an unusually straight blood-red trajectory that was filled with blood mist. It was like a trench that separated the overcrowded BTA army into pieces. It was especially eye-catching. Oh, it feels good. Seeing the masterpiece in front of her, Melissa whistled. Then, with a slight movement of her right foot, her M9X immediately flashed back and forth like a ghost among the Beta army. The crisscrossing trenches formed by the bloody mist had already torn the Beta army that was charging into this area into pieces. This scene made Sosuke, Xiangliang's eyelids twitch wildly. After being partners for so many years, it was the first time Sosuke, Xiangliang saw Melissa Mao with such a violent side. Is it the influence of the Lambda Drive system? When he was familiar with the M9X, Sosuke Xiangliang had learned from the Empire's researchers about the Lambda Drive system equipped with the M9X. This was the latest generation of the Lambda Drive system developed by the Empire after combining its own technology, theories, and technical theories provided by Whisper, Teresa, and Sarah. Although it had roughly the same performance as the Lambda Drive system used by Sosuke Xiangliang, there were some subtle differences. For example, when a Lambda Drive system was activated, it would be adjusted according to the changes in the pilot situation. To put it simply, if the pilot was stimulated and an uncontrollable situation occurred, the new generation of the Lambda Drive system would automatically stimulate the pilot's emotions so that he could maintain his fighting spirit and continue to fight. But Melissa's current situation did not seem to require such an adjustment. Eurus, 7. What are you waiting for? Follow me. Melissa, who was in the midst of killing, looked back and did not find any trace of Sosuke Xiangliang following her. She immediately scolded him. The familiar scolding made Sosuke Xiangliang shrink his neck involuntarily. It seemed that he was paranoid. Boom! Suddenly, the moment Sosuke Xiangliang caught up with Melissa's footsteps, a strong light that illuminated the world suddenly erupted from the horizon. It crossed the vast sky and went straight for the son of the pill slave above the bright night defense line. It's a beam attack, son of the pill slave. Melissa's pupils shrank and subconsciously looked at the screen, looking for the signal that represented the son of the pill slave. The result was reassuring. Eurus 2. Continue the mission with URUZ7. Without waiting for Melissa and Sosuke Xiangliang to reply, the message from the son of the pill slave arrived first. Yes, understood. A blazing aura lingered in the air. Waves of heat from the sky attacked the bright night defense line from top to bottom. The Aubrey soldiers in the middle could not help but raise their heads and look at the warship protected by many octagonal light shields. Prime Minister, don't worry about the son of the pill slave. Continue to follow the battle plan. Although the attack just now looked extremely terrifying, it was actually unable to break through the son of the pill slave's radiation shield. It's just an appetizer. Just as Teresa's voice fell, several rays of light rose from the southwest, northwest, and west directions of the bright night defense line. The enemy's attack was coming. This was the main event. Other than the necessary energy to maintain the flight posture, all the remaining energy will be used on the radiation shield. Understood. No one dared to neglect Teresa's orders. Moreover, the competition between energy weapons had always been very straightforward. There was no other reason. It was a competition of energy intensity. Boom! Rumble. In the sky, 3 terrifying beams of light cut through the sky under the horrified gazes of the Aubrey soldiers and directly bombarded the sun of the pill slave's light shield. At this moment, a bright and dazzling sun rose above the bright night defense line. The sudden burst of blazing heat caused the Aubrey soldiers to instinctively hide in the bunkers, the simple bunkers of the defense line, and even the bottom of the damaged armored vehicles. Even the MS, which had the ability to automatically adjust the temperature of the cockpit, had to raise the shield in its hand as much as possible to block the terrifying shockwave from high up in the sky to prevent the various sensors on the body from being affected and malfunctioning. What followed was a huge explosion that stole the sound of heaven and earth. The ear-piercing sirens were incessant, but Teresa still sat in her seat calmly, quietly waiting for the next result. Beep beep. The moment the static sounded, Teresa's eyes flashed. Got you. On the main screen, A new target specially marked as 01 kept jumping. That was the result of Teresa's inference based on the battlefield situation and then combined with the movements of the Beta army. The mastermind behind the scenes was the hive that controlled the Beta army to attack Aubrey. Chapter 855. The moment the ammunition in the magazine was emptied, the M9X piloted by Sosuke Xiangliang appeared in front of Melissa. Yuras, too, quickly changed the ammunition. The son of Dan's slave has found the target. After receiving the information of the hive's location, Sosuke Xiangliang immediately intervened in Melissa's frenzied killing. He was afraid that Melissa would be so engrossed in killing that she would forget the next step of the mission. Of course, this was only Sosuke Xiangliang's personal worry. As an experienced veteran, even if Melissa was engrossed in killing, she still remembered what she should do. Oh, confirm the information. Melissa slowly exhaled and smiled. Really? I didn't expect Sosuke Xiangliang to care about people one day. What? Sosuke Xiangliang, who was driving the mech, raised the submachine gun in one hand and waved the blade in the other to kill all the attacking betas. Did not seem to hear Melissa's sigh. Nothing. Nothing. You're 6. Did you find a cute baby? Kacha. The moment Melissa's voice fell, her M9X finished changing the magazine. Oh, big sister. Found it. I can see it clearly now. The voice from the son of Dan's slave's deck sounded clearly from the communication device. See it clearly? Your eyes weren't blinded by that thing, right? Melissa's feet moved, and her M9X immediately leapt up. She leapt over the head of Xiangliang Sosuke's M9X, unsheathing the blade at her waist, and with a slash, cleaved an interceptor in half. In the bloody mist that rose into the air, the blade, wrapped in the faint light caused by the lambda drive system, suddenly cut horizontally to the left. Swoosh! With a soft sound, the right limb of the other interceptor-level beta was severed. 2-2-2-2. 3 bullets followed closely, and the moment the interceptor beta fell to the ground, several holes appeared on its body. Yuras, too. We must move faster. Sosuke Xiangliang seemed to have discovered something and appeared a little nervous. Before Melissa could ask, Kurlut's whistle came from the communication device. Wow, big sister. A lot of bugs appeared in front of you. There are at least 10,000 of them. What? 10,000? Melissa and Xiangliang Zongjie exclaimed in shock, while the other gulped. Can we kill all these bugs? Melissa and Sagara Sosuke, who were in the midst of the battle, might not be able to see further, but Kurlutz, who was on the deck of the son of Dan's slave, could see very clearly. In the distance, on the opposite side of the battlefield, bottomless pits continued to appear on the ground. From these pits, there seemed to be an endless tide of betas emerging. As a result, Kurlutz, who was overlooking the battlefield, saw an amazing scene. A monstrous wave formed by the beta army was heading towards Melissa and Sosuke Xiangliang. No, it was heading towards the Bright Night defensive line. The shocking scene made Cruz's hands tremble, and he quickly connected the internal line connected to the bridge. Sir, there was a situation. The enemy has turned out in full force. However, Teresa remained unmoved. Yes, I got it. Inform the OB army that the battle plan will enter the 3rd phase. Let the OB army hold on. After a pause, there seemed to be a trace of reluctance in Teresa's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by determination. Tell Prime Minister Carey that the reinforcements will be here soon. Reinforcements? When she heard the news from the son of Dan's slave, Carey had already seen the sandstorm that occupied the horizon, getting closer and closer, and the closer it was, the more thrilling it was. In the rolling sandstorm, the number of betas, big and small, were swarming in. At this moment, the OB army that was guarding the Bright Night defensive line already knew the upcoming outcome. Those bugs! Have they launched a general attack? Strange. The Bright Red Assault, which had completed emergency maintenance, stopped in the central position of the Bright Night defensive line. Carey stood in front of the cockpit and looked at the increasingly spectacular sandstorm. However, by her side, she could no longer see the silent and firm figure that had been protecting her. When an inaudible sigh drifted away with the wind, Carrie's face was already hidden in the helmet. Pass the order. All troops, fight to the death. Even if we die, we must die in the Bright Night defensive line. I, Carrie Yura Ashar, will stand here with you and die here. Defend Obi to the death. Defend Obi to the death. Defend Obi to the death. The shouts of death resounded through the communication channel in an instant. Up to this point, the Obi soldiers who were still alive and persevering on the Bright Night defensive line already knew their fate. There was anger, there was fear, there was confusion, there were even timid attempts to escape, but now these Obi soldiers who had experienced battle after battle, witnessed their loved ones die in the attack of BDA, or personally sent their loved ones to space, only had the same thought, right? Prime Minister. After the Bright Red Assault was launched, Director Simmons sent a communication from the rear. I'm ready here. However, I'm afraid we can only sustain 2 to 3 waves of attack. Moreover, we can't rule out the interference of those light-level betas. Well, we've already done well. Let's do our best to fight. In front of her was Simmons, who had a hesitant look on his face, but Carrie didn't have the extra energy to delve into this point, because the battle had already begun. The roar of the cannons resounded throughout the Bright Night defensive line like the horn of war. Hundreds of rounds. The moment thousands of cannonballs streaked across the air, it was like a meteor shower streaking across the night, bright and deadly. Boom! Boom! The meteors in the night sky fell rapidly, blasting the seemingly endless front of the Beta army into a continuous stream of fireballs, and even igniting a sea of fire that burned flesh and blood. Looking at the pale, scarlet figures shattering in the explosion and struggling in the sea of fire, Carrie's mind couldn't help but think of the information about how the Beta was formed. They seemed to be tools and soldiers that had been transformed from dead humans. Thinking of this, Carrie seemed to see the figures rolling in the sea of fire in an instant. They were the familiar Obi people. Fear? No. All Carrie had was anger. Team MS, go forward, prioritize killing the interceptor and assault-level BDA. Understood. There were too many Beta players coming at them in a menacing manner. Carrie had given up on the tactics she could think of and used the most direct tactics to prioritize killing the most threatening targets in the Beta army. After the continuous roar of the cannons, the MS troops shot out a rain of light beams. Every flash of light was bound to take away an interceptor and assault-level BTA. In just less than a minute, the Beta army that was under the fierce artillery attack of the Ob army could not stop this monstrous wave of Beta army, even if they left behind thousands or even tens of thousands of corpses. Close, close. The Beta's blood-red eyes could be seen clearly amidst the constant flashes of artillery fire. The sulfur smell emanating from the ugly body seemed to be close at hand, and the sharp roar was deafening. They're here, Director Simmons. In the next second, a flash of light erupted behind the Bright Night defensive line, and smoke rose to cover the sky. Unfortunately, the moment this flash of light erupted, dozens of lasers rose behind the Beta army. In the blink of an eye, the rising smoke exploded into a series of flames. The Bright Knight's last hope failed. Sure enough, those bugs never let us have an easy time. In the face of this scene, Simmons appeared calm, because it was just a wave of seemingly powerful, but in fact, it was just a bait. Its purpose was to cover the subsequent offensive of the Sons of Dan Slave. Simmons knew very well that Obi's pitiful inventory alone could not hold on. The only thing he could do was to adjust his position as much as possible and assist the Sons of Dan Slave in battle. Therefore, the moment the target successfully lured out the light-level Beta hidden in the Beta army, a bloody line appeared in the air, tearing through the billowing sand and dust. It created a straight and bloody line in the middle of the Beta army that was surging forward. Bang! On the deck of the Sons of Dan Slave, bursts of powerful recoil were transmitted to the hull of the Sons of Dan Slave through the offset mechanism. and Kurlutz had killed all the light-level beta that exposed his whereabouts. Along the way, he also took away many other types of beta. Phew. The power of the lambda drive system is really refreshing. Loosening his index finger on the trigger, Kurlutz sighed, but the haze in his heart never dissipated. From the moment the Beta army attacked the Bright Knight defensive line, Melissa and Sosuke Xiangliang disappeared. Within the range of Kurlutz's vision, it was impossible to find the M9X driven by the two. There were only communication signals sent back from time to time. Suddenly, a flash of light lit up in the corner of Kurlutz's eyes. Not good. It's the princess. Boom! The light beam flashed, and an assault level was penetrated, but the huge inertia impact brought by its huge body still knocked the shield and the captivating red assault's hand away. And at the same time, it also opened the captivating red assault's door wide open. Roar! An interceptor covered in wounds followed closely and rushed to the front of the captivating red assault, waving its huge and hard forelimbs straight toward the cockpit of the captivating red assault. Boom! The deafening impact exploded on the spot, shaking Carrie, who was in the cockpit, and she was almost unable to stay awake. Fortunately, other than that, Carrie did not suffer any damage. However, Carrie, who was in a coma, was firmly protected by the PS armor equipped by the captivating red assault, and she was still in danger. Her subordinates, who were struggling to resist the attack of the Beta army, saw this and abandoned the enemy and rushed to the captivating red assault, trying to rescue the captivating red assault. However, as soon as they moved, the light-level Beta hidden in the Beta army was activated. In a few breaths, the first AUB-MS team, centered around the captivating red assault, lost 4 MSs. Boom! The M1 Heresy was penetrated by the light-level Beta, and at the moment of the explosion, Carrie, who was in a short coma, woke up faintly. However, the moment she woke up, the area she was in was already turned upside down. The large and small Beta crossed the trenches, flipped over the burning tanks and armored vehicles, tore open the cockpits of the fallen MS, and dragged out the pilots who had lost their lives. Then, Carrie closed her eyes abruptly, unable to bear to watch anymore. However, the sounds of impact and knocking from the outside were endless. Carrie could not help but feel sad that she was about to follow the tragic fate of her superiors. Her survival instinct made Carrie grip the joystick tightly, and once again controlled the captivating red assault to fight back. However, before the captivating red assault could attack, 2 lasers struck, and the captivating red assault's left leg and right arm were broken on the spot. The explosion caused by the blazing energy even caused the captivating red assault system to show signs of collapse. Looking at the flashing red light in front of her, Carrie could not help but laugh. Is this the end? Chisaka, right? Chapter 856. The moment when captivating Red's assault was drowned by the Beta army, the battlefield surveillance had already captured it clearly. That scene caused almost everyone in the command center of the Bright Knight defense line to turn ashen, especially Simmons, who was the technical support. Regarding Ob's current situation, she knew all of Ob's existing equipment and was very clear that Ob's remnant army was able to hold on until now. In addition to the hatred of the Beta army for destroying their homeland, it was more of the support left in the hearts of many Ob soldiers after the many efforts made by the young Prime Minister. Now, was Ob's last support going to be devoured by that damn monster? Woo woo woo. Suddenly, an alarm sounded in the command hall. It was not the alarm of the Bright Knight defense line being penetrated, but the alarm from the rear. What happened? Simmons, who seemed to have woken up from a dream, quickly asked. Unfortunately, no one answered her question, because the scene on the screen was enough to make everyone's morale drop to the lowest point. Flash! Several flashes of light suddenly rose from the rear of the Bright Knight defense line, the frontline logistics support point established by the Dawn Society. Under the ear-piercing alarm, they rushed to the front line like meteors, straight to the location of captivating Red's assault. At this moment, no one knew the meaning of these flashes of light. Even Carly, who was saved by these flashes of light, was the same. A pale figure, a bright red figure. In the cockpit that was surrounded by the smell of sulfur, Carly desperately searched for a possibility that could allow herself to make Captivating Red's assault fight back again. However, the small beta that had crawled all over Captivating Red's body did not allow this possibility to appear. Even if Captivating Red's energy device was still operating, it could still provide energy for the PS armor to operate, enough to make these ugly monsters break all their teeth. The bright red monsters that were filled with sulfur smoke still opened their bloody mouths and bit off Captivating Red's armor piece by piece. Ka, 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 ka. The PS armor, which was able to ignore live ammunition attacks, finally fell into a trough of energy after breaking countless monsters' teeth. Each and every bite consumed the energy of Captivating Red's attack. At the same time, it also consumed the last of Carly's life in this world. There was no other way. In the end, Carrie's final effort failed to make Captivating Red retaliate. The only thing left was the box under the driver's seat. As Prime Minister as the current head of the Asha family, at the same time, it was also the last resort for humans. The screen in front of him kept shaking. The ear-piercing noises of external equipment being gnawed on could be heard. Beep, beep, beep. The moment the emergency alarm sounded, the energy of Captivating Red's assault was exhausted. Her right hand instinctively reached for the box. Let's stop here. Carrie Yura Shar, will never allow myself to be manipulated by you disgusting monsters. However, her right hand had not yet touched the cold handle in the small box. Changes had already taken place. Several flashes of light fell from the sky at a speed that could not be seen by the naked eye, plunging into the monsters that were drowning Captivating Crimson. Then, a scarlet storm engulfed the surroundings. Pooh! Pooh! The muffled sounds of flesh being cut by sharp weapons became the accompaniment of this scarlet storm. In the midst of the blood fog that was rapidly spreading around, silver flashes of light were faintly discernible. Every time a silver flash flickered, one or several BETs would be cut into a pile of lifeless flesh. However, in less than a few minutes, the monsters that were drowning Captivating Crimson had turned into a pile of meaningless flesh. Looking at the monitor screen, Captivating Crimson had almost been destroyed. Now that her energy had been depleted, she miraculously escaped from danger. Looking at the monster that was crawling all over Captivating Crimson's body, gnawing on her armor, and almost dragging Carrie out of the cockpit, now strangely turned into a pile of flesh, Simmons couldn't help but gasp as he subconsciously asked, "What are you talking about? What the hell happened?" Suddenly, a thought flashed through Simmons' mind. Wait, did something happen at the Dawn Society's frontline logistics support point just now? This time, everyone in the command center reacted. It's the weapons of unknown origin stored at the support point. Just now, they were activated. They were activated for no reason. Activated? Simmons' gaze changed, and he stared blankly at the silver flash that was moving around with Captivating Crimson as the center. After those few items were discovered by Obu-jun, they had not responded to all of Dawn Society's attempts, not to mention activating and attacking. Just as Simmons was bewildered, the alarm sounded again. This time, it was an air defense alarm. The only remaining air defense radar of the Bright Night Defense Line detected several unidentified targets entering the sky above the Bright Night Defense Line at a super high speed. According to calculations, the destination was the Bright Night Defense Line. To be more precise, it was the location of Captivating Crimson. Bright Night Defense Line. Please do not engage in any air defense interception. Those are reinforcements. Immediately after, a message from the son of a pill slave made the command center boil. Reinforcements, are they coming? The howls of the monsters gradually faded away. The noise that once symbolized the countdown to death had disappeared. Carrie, who was waiting for the last moment to arrive, released the cold handle, moved her fingers, and activated the backup energy of Captivating Crimson. This did not allow Captivating Crimson to regain the ability to move again. It only activated the ability to monitor and communicate with the outside world. Buzz! Looking at the main screen that lit up again, all Carrie saw was a mess. A pile of broken limbs immersed in captivating crimson's liquid, and a white body standing in front of captivating crimson. What a mess. Kaliura Ashar. A familiar tone, a familiar voice, and that, a familiar yet unfamiliar body. That's right. What a mess. Carrie pulled the corners of her mouth, wanting to show a self-deprecating smile. But she could not smile. Not long ago, in order to save herself and captivating crimson, the entire Ms. team that accompanied her had lost their lives in the monster's ambush. What? Have you already lost the courage to live? Or do you want me to shoot you and send you to meet the subordinates who died for you? The white body raised its muzzle and pointed at captivating crimson's cockpit. But Carrie was not afraid at all. Still the same. Lund, Mina, Sahak. If you are here to laugh at me, as you wish. But now, please be sure to support the Bright Night defense line. Carrie's response made the person frown. But in the end, she still controlled the body to lower its muzzle. Just as Carrie had said, she wasn't here to laugh at her. Her goal here was to protect her motherland. In the name of Lund, Mina Sahak. Mina snorted coldly, but she did not continue to mock Carrie. Then, she turned on the all-channel communication and announced her existence loudly. All soldiers of Aub, listen up. I am Lund, Mina Sahak. Now, join the battle to defend Aub with your allies. Along with the announcement, there was a purple-blue beam of light that tore through the dark clouds and thousands of lightning bolts. Rumble. In an instant, this world that was covered by slaughter and lightning welcomed the light of destruction. The light of destruction swept past the Bright Night defense line and went straight into the rear of the Beta army. Then, from right to left, it fired fiercely at the rear of the Beta army. Boom! Boom! As the light of destruction gradually faded, it was the silent world, and after this silence, a huge roar broke out. The flames that soared into the sky with the sound of suppressing thousands of lightning bolts announced the arrival of this great momentum. A huge mushroom cloud slowly rose, breaking through the thick thunderclouds, forcing them to no longer block the sunlight, allowing the sunlight to fall through the gap between the mushroom cloud and the thunderclouds, scattering on the Beta army that was engulfed by the flames, illuminating the face of death that was erased by the light of destruction. Young. Electronic siege cannon. Carrie was not familiar with the purple-blue light, because she had once fought side by side with a battleship that had this light. Unfortunately, she did not guess correctly. A pitch-black and unfamiliar spaceship quickly descended from the clouds. Several light spots flew out from the spaceship and landed at the location where captivating red was at an extremely fast speed. As the distance between the two sides continued to close, Carrie's eyes changed, and she became extremely surprised. Zagu, Gouda, Zaft. While in a daze, Carrie did not forget to ask the identity of the MS that landed beside captivating red. Yes, Zaft. Mina's answer was unusually straightforward. It was so straightforward that Carrie was speechless and could not find a reason to speak for a while. You guys take the Prime Minister back to the rear. Leave this to me. Mina, who casually ordered, paused, and then added, leave it to me and Knight K to deal with it. Thus, captivating red was picked up by two Zagus, and under the cover of Gouda, they quickly left the front line and returned to the rear. Looking at the white mech that stood in place and faced the monsters that surged up again alone, more questions arose in Carrie's mind. Wait, Knight K. Knight K. All of a sudden, Carrie realized what Mina was referring to. In Carrie's memory, there was only one person who would be called that by others. How is it possible? He has clearly joined the command of Speaker Dylandal and become a core figure of Zaft in the name of the Holy Lion Knight. How could he appear here at this time? Chapter 857. Altitude 3000. Rendezvous with the son of Dan's slave. Now maintain the speed of descent and begin to enter the son of Dan's slave's protective circle. Mei Ling withdrew her gaze from the dazzling radiation shield of the son of Dan's slave and focused on guiding the Minerva's descent. After descending directly into the atmosphere from outer space, the positron siege cannon was launched directly above the thunderous sea of clouds and bombarded the sea of clouds. As CIC, Mei Ling was involved in the entire process. Especially when the positron siege cannon launched its attack, there was no visible target at all, only a guidance signal that came from nowhere. Looking at the rumbling mushroom cloud on the main screen and the thin layer of sweat on Mei Ling's forehead, Talia could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. As the captain of the Minerva, she knew very well how uncertain everyone was when they gave the order to attack. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. Thinking of this, Talia turned her head slightly and looked at the beautiful figure sitting on the right rear side. Miss Audrey, I'll have to trouble you next. To be honest, although Audrey has a good diplomatic relationship with Plant, the current situation of this ship and our situation is a bit delicate. While rendezvous with the son of Dan's slave, more information was shared with Audrey Britannia, who was actually Lakis Klein. The time was behind. The time of the Minerva was far behind the time of Audrey. According to the time of the meeting with Ray Mingkai and the others in the Throne of Command, it had only been slightly more than a month since the Minerva's time. However, Audrey's time was already the second year since the outbreak of the X-1 Rift crisis. Talia, who did not have any sense of reality, had to accept this fact even though she felt it was ridiculous. Captain Talia, leave the matter of communicating with Audrey to me. This is also the reason why I came with the ship. Lakis nodded slightly and agreed to Talia's request. However, if they wanted to communicate with Audrey, they would have to wait a while. Right now, the battle was far from over. In the center of the battlefield, the bloody storm was still wreaking havoc in the beta. Behind the blood-red storm that had rolled up, in addition to the white and gold colors, there were also some red embellishments. The golden deviant sky Mina was leaning on her sword as she stood on top of a mountain of Beta's limbs. Inside, Mina stared coldly at the Beta army that was swarming in from all directions, not at all intimidated by the menacing Betas. All of a sudden, several speedy assault-class Betas rushed up the hill of wreckage ahead of the rest. The moment the heavy and quick footsteps stepped on the small mountain of wreckage, blood splattered everywhere. In the blink of an eye, these assault-class BETs that could trample the wreckage beneath their feet would inevitably crash into Jinyuduanshan Mina. However, just as they were about to smash Metal Strange Sky Mina into smithereens, several flashes of light suddenly appeared and sliced these assault-class monsters into pieces like sharp swords. Wallalala! In the blink of an eye, the 10-meter-tall assault-class monsters that were stepping on rolling blood turned into minced meat all over the ground. It was extremely thrilling. If it weren't for the fact that Mina had been on the battlefield for a long time, she would have been shocked by the terrifying scene before her, and not be as calm as she was now. I thought you had already passed these monsters and attacked the target, Knight. As Jinyuduanshan Mina's white greatsword was pulled out, another burst of blood splattered. No, it's not time yet. As Ray Mingkai's voice came, a vague outline appeared on the left side of Jinyuduanshan Mina. At the same time, more flashes of light flashed around this vague outline, plunging headfirst into the Beta army that did not know what death was, setting off a storm of blood. However, this line of defense is about to collapse. Even with the addition of his combat power, Sahak, the situation of the Bright Knight line of defense could only be maintained on the verge of collapse. Soon, it will be over. The vague outline turned from nothingness to reality. In a breath's time, Lancelot King's sword appeared on the left side of Jinyuduanshan Mina. At the same time, the flashes of light that were wreaking havoc in the Beta army turned around one after another, and like a disciplined army, they formed a neat formation in front of Lancelot King's sword. Then, countless fluorescent lights burst out from these armed compound flying wings that were arranged in a neat formation. Buzz! Buzz! It was a radiation shield, but it was not a radiation shield, because at this moment it was not a defense, but an attack. Clang! The moment the sound of metal exploded, A beam of light with great momentum shot out from the front of the formation formed by the armed compound flying wings. At this moment, the air was burning. The pool of blood flowing down from the wreckage immediately boiled, emitting a foul smell. But these changes could not change what was about to happen in the slightest. Amidst the deafening roar, the beam of light that shot out pierced through the Beta army in front of Lancelot King's sword in one breath, and then effortlessly moved slowly with Rei Minkai's fine control, sweeping through the Beta army from left to right. The Beta's body, composed of carbon-based materials, was burned by the terrifying high temperature, and as bursts of strange fragrance rose, they were turned into charcoal in an instant, and then dissipated with the wind under the impact of the high-temperature gas. It was a shocking scene. At this moment, Mina was moved. When she faced the assault attack just now, Mina was calm as usual, without the slightest fear. But at this moment, she showed an incredulous look. Even if she had seen Lancelot King's sword rush in and out of the Beta army with ease by relying on his heaven-defying subspace shield, she would never have thought that Lancelot King's sword would have such an amazing trick up his sleeve. In a standalone state, he could launch an attack comparable to a battleship's cannon. No, even an ordinary battleship's cannon would not be able to achieve such an amazing sweeping effect, right? Looking at the charred wreckage all over the ground, looking at the faintly visible heat wave, only then did Mina understand what Rei Minkai meant when he said that it would end soon. The vibrating sound of the beam of light hitting the air gradually subsided. The light shield array, composed of many armed composite wings, also disintegrated. Logically speaking, the armed composite wings, which consumed a lot of energy, should return to the main body for a new round of charging under the redundant plan of the automatic control program. However, Rei Minkai stopped the automatic control system's control and manually ordered the armed composite wings, which consumed a lot of energy but still retained the ability to cut at high speed, to disperse again and hunt down the fish that escaped the net. Master Sahaka, are you interested in accompanying me on a trip? Have you found the target? Yes. Just now, my allies have found the entrance to the bug's lair. Slightly messy vibrations came from the ground. It was not difficult to see from these vibrations that there was a large number of Beta rushing to the surface from the depths of the cave. Be careful, Sosuke. These bugs seem to be very sensitive to electronic signals. On the other side of the cave, two M9X with the ECS system deployed were hidden in an undetectable corner. The only worry was that the Beta's sensitivity to electronic signals would likely expose the whereabouts of the two M9X. Fortunately, the BDA that rushed to the surface from the depths of the ground did not seem to notice the two M9X. Instead, they rushed out of the cave in the billowing sand and dust and rushed toward the bright night line of defense. Yura's, too, safe. After carefully observing the situation on the left and right sides of the tunnel through a miniature probe, Sosuke Xiangliang sent out a safe signal. Understood. But wait. We still need to wait for reinforcements. Melissa Mao, who also used a miniature probe to observe the situation, stopped Sosuke Xiangliang, who was eager to try. Understood. The next second, Sosuke Xiangliang raised his left hand and pressed a few buttons on the left dashboard. A hard tube extended from the left foot of the M9X and probed downward. When it was about to reach the ground, it quickly unfolded and opened up an arc-shaped net, making close contact with the ground. Beep beep. Sosuke Xiangliang's eyes lit up. Yura's too. There's a situation. Another group of bugs rushed out. Looking at the feedback from the arc-shaped net, which was actually a vibration detector device, Sosuke Xiangliang immediately realized something. They seem to have been discovered. Let's go. Melissa Mao did not waste any time, nor did she hesitate. She decisively issued the order to retreat. That's right. It was not that the Beta did not notice the 2M9XS, but they acted as if they could not see them and bolted out of the cave. Then, it was the emergency situation where Melissa and Sosuke Xiangliang were about to be attacked from the front and back. TSK, someone is controlling these damn bugs. One in front and one behind. the M9X, who covered each other's retreat, activated the delayed fuse on the grenades at their waist and alternately threw them to more hidden corners. They were ready to give a big gift to the beta that rushed out of the cave. In the rapid and loud footsteps of the M9X, Melissa was the first to see the light in front of her. Sosuke, Roger, at the same time, the two M9X threw all the grenades in their hands into the dark cave behind them. They also took out the smoke grenades in unison, ignited them, and threw them toward the light in front of them. 5. Melissa shouted. Her M9X was one step behind. Sosuke, Xiangliang's M9X, rushed to the front, and he was already holding the assault rifle in his hand. 4. There was a flash of light in the darkness behind them. Boom! The grenade exploded. The shockwave generated by the explosion of the grenade rushed along the long and narrow passage, chasing after the two M9X. As soon as the sound ended, another one sounded. In the roar of the explosion, the beta's roar was getting closer and closer. 3. The shockwave caught up with Melissa's M9X, bringing with it a bit of bright red and billowing smoke. 2. Sosuke Xiangliang was calm and was not affected by the explosion behind him. In front of him was the boundary between darkness and light. 1. As soon as Melissa's voice sounded, Sosuke Xiangliang's M9X rolled forward. Two faintly visible beams of light brushed past the back of the M9X, tearing open the darkness of the passage and blowing the ceiling into pieces. Tut tut tut. In the next second, gunshots rang out, and flowers of blood bloomed wantonly. It was the M9X piloted by Sosuke Xiangliang, who raised his gun and shot the light level that was lying in ambush around the cave entrance one by one. Chapter 858. The smoke from the muzzle of the gun had yet to dissipate, and in front of them was a large area of land dyed red by the bright red liquid. Looking at the broken limbs floating in the bright red liquid, Xiangliang Soji took a few deep breaths and calmed his nervous emotions. Just now, they were already on the brink of death. When they sensed the intention of the beta to attack them from the front and back in time, they did not hesitate to risk being ambushed by the light-level beta outside. The choice to rush out of the cave was the right one. However, it was another game with death. 222. Gunshots and the roars of monsters came from behind. Soji, quick, occupy the advantageous terrain. The monsters inside are about to rush out. Melissa Mao's voice was a little urgent. It made sense. If they only relied on the few dozen grenades equipped with the two M9XS, they could only stop the large-scale beta from rushing out of the cave. No, Yura's too. Now what we have to do is to get out of the way. However, Xiangliang Soji's response made Melissa Mao a little confused. Even so, based on the tacit understanding accumulated over the years, Melissa Mao still drove her M9X to the right and rolled on the ground. In the flying dust, Melissa Mao saw an unfamiliar pure white body with unfolded light wings. It was pointing at the hole where the beta was constantly rushing out. Time seemed to have become unusually slow at this moment. In that slow time, Melissa Mao saw a large number of miniature aircraft flying out from behind the pure white body, hovering and then gathering in front of it, forming an array of unknown meaning. The moment her doubts arose, they were eliminated. The surging air, the blazing high temperature, and the strong light that made it almost impossible to see became Melissa Mao's feelings at this moment. When the rumbling roar gradually disappeared from the external sound capture system, Melissa saw the true face behind the dazzling and terrifying light. The burning and melting ground, the charred limbs, the originally slow-flowing bright red liquid was nowhere to be seen. It must have evaporated under the blazing high temperature. She looked back along the scorched traces. The hole that should have been constantly gushing out of the beta had become a hell surrounded by high temperature and dripping magma. Yura's too. Are you okay? At the same time that Sosuke Sara drove his M9X closer to Melissa Mao, he also looked at the pure white body that had suddenly appeared. No, I'm fine. Melissa shook her head and then controlled the mech to raise its hands. She signaled to the pure white mech that she had no ill intentions and also expressed her gratitude. However, she never expected that the pure white mech was not a stranger as Melissa thought, but an old acquaintance. Long time no see. Years to years 7. The voice that came from the encrypted communication channel used by the son of Dan's slave stunned the two of them, and they blurted out almost at the same time. Night. Melissa sucked in a breath of cold air when she realized the identity of the unfamiliar body. He couldn't help but recall the shocking scene from just now. Even the previous mithril, or even the opposing amalgam, probably didn't have such an exaggerated body, right? With a raise of his hand, he completely changed the battle situation of a local battlefield, and even reached the terrifying point of fighting against a small and medium-sized army in a single state. The pure white mech was the Lancelot Sword of Kings driven by Rei Minkai. After receiving the information from Melissa and Sosuke Sora, Rei Minkai defeated the Beta army that attacked the front of the Bright Knight defense line as quickly as possible and rushed to meet with them as soon as possible. It seems that the scene just now scared you guys. I'm really sorry. No, I'm just a little surprised. That body doesn't look like an M9. It's not the Sword of Flames either, right? Sosuke Sora's eyes kept wandering around the pure white mech. No matter how he searched his mind for the AS knowledge he was familiar with, he couldn't find an AS image that matched it. Oh, this is not an M9, nor is it the Sword of Flames. Well, do you still remember the Lancelot? This mech can be considered its follow-up. Lancelot's Sword of Kings, surrounded by armed composite wings, spread out its light wings, and slowly landed in front of the two M9Xs. Is this the hole that Teresa's speculated? Rei Minkai looked at the hole that had cooled down by more than half, but he could still see the obvious flow of magma. Yes, according to the data collected by the crystal monitoring device, there seems to be a huge underground space under this land. Melissa Mao sent the collected data to Rei Minkai while giving her own speculation. If the information on the son of Dan's slave is correct, even if this huge underground space is not where the leader is, I'm afraid it's where these monsters stockpile their troops. Is that so? Then come with me. The armed composite wings that were hovering around moved together and flew into the hole that was still burning hot in an orderly manner in a formation of 3 wings. Immediately after, Lancelot's Sword of Kings retracted its light wings. The moment it landed on the ground, a set of high-speed pulleys were placed behind its legs, and it rushed into the hole at a speed of 70 kilometers per hour. Melissa and Sosuke Xiangliang looked at each other as they looked at the back of the figure that was stirred up by the high-speed pulleys. They didn't say anything, but there was a tacit understanding. In the dark cave, the roars of the Beta echoed from time to time. However, they didn't see any Beta rushing out of the cave and pouncing on the intruders. This led them to take the lead in entering the hidden underground. It was very different from a hive that Rei Minkai was familiar with. According to the usual impression and settings of the Beta, in addition to producing Beta and collecting resources, the hive was more like a resource launchpad. After collecting enough G elements, the hive would activate the relevant mechanism, pack the G elements, and launch them into deep space. Therefore, the structure of the hive would be more like a launch pad. But right now, the hive hidden underground did not have a launching-related structure. It feels like the structure has been deliberately modified through the feedback of the armed composite wings that flew around to collect terrain information. According to the usual practice, the assistant White Cat State Zero quickly presented a roughly speculated model of the underground space in front of Rei Minkai. I'm afraid it's their work. Destiny Council? After Rei Minkai glanced at the model of the underground space, an answer emerged in his mind. An answer that could be confirmed immediately, even if it was just speculation. I'm afraid so. White Cat State Zero waved its paws and curled its lips. Other than them, I can't think of anyone else. Suddenly, the White Cat State Zero's eyes changed. There's a situation. Raymond Kai's eyes changed, and several flashing red interfaces suddenly popped up, occupying a small half of the screen. It was a group of armed, composite wings that investigated a tunnel. Enemies? No. White Cat State Zero slowly put down its paws, and its expression seemed to be somewhat unbearable. That's a little. Words rolled in White Cat State Zero's throat a few times, but in the end, it did not say anything. And Melissa Mao, who was following behind, seemed to have noticed something strange. Knight, did you discover something? Ray Minkai was silent for a moment and finally nodded. Sort of. Melissa Mao and Xiangliang Sosuke looked at each other through the screen. Both of them were confused. Logically speaking, if it was just discovering an enemy, Ray Minkai's reaction would not be so strange. Beta still did not appear. The eerie silence still lingered in the surroundings, until Melissa Mao and Xiangliang Sosuke, who followed Lancelot King, soared all the way to a large space that seemed to be at least 1,000 square meters. Melissa Mao's expression froze. Xiangliang Sosuke's expression, which had always been calm, changed. A sigh sounded from Ray Minkai's throat. So this was the meaning of White Cat State Zero. That strange, translucent sarcoma, the blood vessels that were agitated and sometimes shriveled behind the translucent flesh membrane, there were faintly discernible figures. Made Ray Minkai finally remember a certain cruel setting about Beta. Knight, this is Melissa Mao Bitterlip. This female soldier, who had been through many battlefields, could not help but be deeply shocked when faced with such a horrifying scene. Tools, cores, and so on. They were such an existence, wantonly transformed into this ghostly, inhuman appearance by Beta. Ray Minkai's eyes showed a trace of unbearable. Knowing was one thing. Witnessing it with one's own eyes was another. But they are humans. Melissa Mao's voice was trembling. In the sarcoma closer to Melissa, more complete figures could be seen. But the further behind the sarcoma, the more horrifying it was. The figures in those sarcomas were no longer complete, or missing limbs, or lost. Only a brain was left. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The subtle roar became louder and louder. It was the sound of Ray Minkai recalling the nearby armed compound wings. But now they are not. After a pause, Ray Minkai looked at White Cat State Zero. Give them relief. As White Cat State Zero nodded, the recalled armed compound wings locked onto the target and shot out a burst of light torrential rain. Boom, boom, boom. The light beam pierced through the sarcoma and scattered the destructive flames in this underground space, wantonly burning the figures in the sarcoma. The imagined screams did not happen. Then most of their senses have been cut off. What's left is probably only the brain that is still alive. Melissa Mao was silent. Xiangliang Zongjie was silent. What kind of existence was the Beta? The two of them finally saw through the scene in front of them that was different from the intelligence. Beta was an enemy, could only be an enemy that would not rest until death. At this moment, in the hearts of the two, this thought became more and more intense. And in front of Ray Minkai, a shadow quietly appeared. Kill me. Chapter 859. The shadow was faintly discernible. The words that came out made people feel a trace of madness, a trace of resentment, and a trace of pleading. Ghost! The tail of the White Cat Zero seemed to have bristled. Scared, Ray Minkai glanced at the White Cat Zero. How is this possible? The White Cat Zero grinned, revealing two sharp canine teeth. There are no ghosts in this world. The White Cat Zero muttered a few words, and its gaze fell on the sarcoma that had been burned by the sea of fire. Maybe it's a trap, but we have no other choice. Isn't it? No matter how we go, our goal is the lowest level. Ray Minkai was unmoved. The goal was very clear from the beginning. Night. It's getting late. In the flickering light, Melissa Mao's expression was not very good. Let's go. With one in front and two behind, the three bodies stepped into the burning sea of fire one after another. and stepped into the tunnel that led to the lowest level. A deathly pale light lingered in the vast space at the lowest level. The light that was like flowing liquid made this underground space have a trace of strangeness and a chilling atmosphere. However, the figure standing in the middle of this space turned a blind eye to this. They're here. Sure enough, as long as there's a small flaw, these little mice will consciously run over. Ha ha! It's really delightful. The creepy laughter echoed in this underground space again and again. But this is a little overkill for you, the respected War Empress. Ha ha! Dong! 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 The slowly rotating meatball made a series of muffled sounds. It seemed to be refuting, but also seemed to be agreeing. It seemed a little contradictory. What a pity. Now, I really want to see your expression with my own eyes. But it can't be done. This is a very regrettable thing. However, it was also something worth remembering. It is precisely because of this that your war can be perfectly presented before my eyes. Embark. He stared at the slowly rotating meatball. Through the gaps of the meatball, he saw the brain that was wrapped in life support solution and connected by many artificial nerves. It was called the brain of Elizabeth Emirs, the War Queen. Boom! An ear-piercing boom rang out, and the entire underground space boiled over. Waves of violent tremors surged out from the depths of this underground space like a tsunami. In fact, in the areas where the tremors were the most intense, one could even hear the roar of thunder. Beta. It was the beta of an all-out attack. A huge net that had been woven for a long time was finally opened at this moment. He faced Ray Minkai and the other two. He pounced in the direction of Kagaya, who was glad that the beta had retreated once again. This was bound to be the fiercest attack of the beta army. Rumble. Unsettling and terrifying rumbles reverberated in the dark tunnel. The accompanying vibration caused the airborne radar to emit an ear-piercing alarm that resounded throughout the cockpit. Quick! Hide behind me! In front of him, he could vaguely see countless shadows swaying in the tunnel. After Ray Minkai, who had no time to explain anything, issued the alarm loudly, he decisively activated the subspace barrier of Lancelot King's sword. The light disappeared from the cockpit in an instant, and the moment it lit up again, the originally dark tunnel in front of him was already an astonishing scene of countless large and small betas rushing towards them. There was no doubt, no matter what kind of body it was, if it jumped into this narrow tunnel and was met by these countless betas rushing towards the ground, it would be a terrifying scene with a slim chance of survival. Amidst the rumbling, running roar, it was the terrifying movement created by the orderly arranged assault-level betas as the vanguard. Listening to the rumbling, running roar, looking at the large and small betas rushing past them, Melissa Mao and Sagara Sosuke did not have an easy time. Their instincts of fear of death made the two of them firmly control their bodies behind Lancelot King's sword. What made the two of them puzzled was that Lancelot King's sword in front of them did not make any counterattacks as they had imagined. Instead, he stood in place in dead silence, motionless, as if he had accepted his fate and faced this terrifying beta army head-on. But here was the strange thing. Even though Lancelot King's sword stood straight in place, the terrifying beta army could not shake Lancelot King's sword in the slightest. They could not even make Lancelot King's sword take half a step back. What the hell is going on? The moment this doubt arose, the sharp Sagara Sosuke's eyes moved, and he actually captured a strange scene. An assault-level beta that suddenly rushed past Lancelot King's blade had half of its body sliced off for no reason. It rolled to the ground in a splattering of blood until it hit the right foot of Sagara Sosuke's M9X. Only then did it come to a stop. This is a subspace barrier. It can swallow light and matter. Don't get too close to Lancelot. While Sagara Sosuke was still puzzled by the strange death of the beta that rolled to the feet of the M9X, Ray Minkai's explanation also sounded. With the strange characteristics of the subspace barrier, Ray Minkai was completely unafraid of this wave of beta army that rushed out from the deepest part of the ground. One had to know that for Lancelot King's sword, who had relied on the subspace barrier to directly face the light-class battleship in the previous space war. This was just a small scene. It just took some time. That's right. Compared to the Bright Knight defense line, it might only take some time here. Presumably, the mastermind behind the beta must have used his last resort. In the sky, thunder rumbled, and the dark clouds once again covered this part of the world. Underground, the monster army rushed out and rushed towards the Bright Knight defense line. Between the two, there was the torrential rain that blocked the line of sight, suppressed the billowing sand and dust raised by the monster army's attack, and wantonly washed the ugly bodies of the monsters. Under the curtain of rain that was sometimes dim and sometimes illuminated by lightning, the pairs of scarlet eyes rose and fell like waves, one after another, sweeping towards the Bright Knight defense line. Woo 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 woo! The ear-piercing alarm tore through the dim curtain of rain, and it also tore apart the rationality of the humans who had yet to recover from the previous tragic battle. Enemy attack! The hoarse roar aroused the human soldiers who had just laid down, guiding the extremely tired soldiers to pick up their weapons again, board their tanks, and board their MS, waiting for the last moment to arrive. The moment the ear-piercing alarm rang throughout the entire defense line, searchlights lit up one after another, sweeping across the waves that flickered with blood-red light, revealing the evil and ugly bodies in front of the human soldiers. Attack! Attack freely! There was no unified order, but as long as the frontline commanders who had survived the previous battle, they would roar in unison to attack. In an instant, gunshots rang out, artillery roared, and beams of light broke through the curtain of rain, piercing through the assault-level beta that had rushed up to the defense line. Boom! The sound of gunshots and artillery explosions could be heard on the defense line. Missiles that fell from the sky and tore apart the black clouds with countless thunderbolts were either blown up in the air by the light level behind the beta army, blasting a hole in the surrounding black clouds, or riding on the billowing smoke and crashing into the path of the beta army, blowing the surrounding monsters into pieces. The first area has been invaded by a mixed regiment of assault level and interception level. There have been a large number of casualties. Requesting support. The first line of defense in the second area has fallen. We have lost contact with the 3rd Armored Division. Requesting support. Emergency requests for help continued to gather in the command center behind the Bright Knight defense line. Many liaisons racked their brains, trying to find troops that could support the front line in the last line of defense against Aubrey. The troops that had retreated to the rear to rest in the previous battle were ordered to attack again. Even if these soldiers were still tied with blood-soaked bandages, the armored vehicles still had half-cracked hatch doors that could not be closed that had not been repaired, and the MS that was in tatters and did not have any time to change its armor were in the same situation. Everyone knew that this would be the last battle between Aubrey and the monster known as Beta. The monster that had devoured most of Aubrey's territory had come out in full force. At this moment, the only thing the soldiers of Aubrey, who have been fighting to this day, could do was to defend this last homeland with their lives. In the chaotic and orderly command center, Carrie, who had not changed out of her pilot uniform, gritted her teeth and stood there with a gloomy expression. She was struggling. As a leader, she should stand in the command center and command this battle. However, Carriera Asha would never stand in the command center and wait for the end of the battle. Instead, as a warrior, she would lead her subordinates who loved and supported her to fight at the forefront and hold the final victory in her hands. But now, are you discouraged? Kukli Yura Ashar. The moment the familiar voice rang out, Carrie's eyes lit up and she turned around to look at the person standing at the door. However, before Carrie could open her mouth, the person who had just arrived stopped her from speaking. Tian Mina will never lend it to you. Kukli Yura Ashar. The woman standing at the door looked around and nodded to the soldiers of Aubrey who saluted her before looking at Carrie again. Are you unwilling to stand here and watch the soldiers of Aubrey fight? Or are you still not used to your current identity and are still attached to that bloody battlefield? The woman named Lund Mina Sahak took a step forward and walked towards Carrie with an intimidating aura. Carrie calmly looked at the woman who had always been prejudiced against her. She knew that even if she took over her father's responsibility and became Aubrey's prime minister, it would still be the same. Since she was young, the siblings of the Sahak family had never looked her in the eye. No, in this time of crisis, as Aubrey's prime minister and the current head of House Asha, I should be fighting with my subordinates on the front lines, not standing here and issuing orders to my subordinates. She stared into Mina's eyes and enunciated each word clearly. Not sending my subordinates to their deaths. Seeing the determination in Carrie's eyes that bordered on stubbornness, Mina suddenly burst out laughing. Ha ha ha, interesting. Looks like House Silent has indeed fallen hard. Oh well, it's about time. Mina looked at Director Simmons, who was standing at the side and keeping silent. Simmons, that thing is still with you, right? Simmons was taken aback. He glanced at Carrie and slowly nodded. Good. It's time to return it to its rightful owner. Mina took a few steps forward and patted Carrie's shoulder. Go and welcome your dawn. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.